Chapter 2376, Leveling Heaven Star Moon Kingdom, White River City. Several dozen lights flashed in the teleportation hall as Burning Owl and his team arrived in White River City. So, this is Zero Wings territory? Burning Owl muttered, surprised as he observed his surroundings. Usually, one could determine how prosperous an NPC city was based on how much activity there was in its teleportation hall. The average level of the players in the hall was also a testament to the region's average standards. White River City's teleportation hall was extraordinarily lively. Although the city couldn't yet rival imperial capitals, it could easily compete with Empire's top-ranked cities. God's Domain's empires were incredibly large, with easily several times the player population found in the largest kingdoms. Thus, even Empire's top-ranked cities were more prosperous than Kingdom's capital cities. As far as Burning Owl knew, very few kingdoms had cities like White River City. He was also surprised by these players' average level. Most of the players in the teleportation hall had already reached level 96, with many experts at level 98. White River City's players could even rival those in imperial capitals in terms of levels. While Burning Owl assessed the situation in the teleportation hall, several more lights flashed behind him. As these players arrived, they attracted a lot of attention. They were rather hard not to notice. The moment this group appeared, everyone in the teleportation hall was overwhelmed by a sense of dread. Players' instincts urged them to flee as the newcomers' auras washed over them. What? Starlink actually dispatched its newly formed Hellfire Legion? Burning Owl frowned when he saw them. After the planar passages had opened, Starlink had allied with the superpower that ruled over the demonic Hell World, one of the 6 large-scale otherworlds that were connected to the Eastern continent. Like Dark players' favored areas, the demonic Hell World focused on slaughter, and many of its players possessed a powerful legacy L. Individually, these players were even stronger than those from the Sea God's realm. Relying on the demonic Hell World's special legacy, Starlink had formed the Hellfire Legion, which was now the strongest legion under the guild's command. The weakest of the legion's members was a refinement realm expert, and with their special legacy, even peak experts would find these players incredibly difficult to kill. With the individual members so powerful, it was easy to imagine how horrific all 1,000 Hellfire Legion members would be when they worked together. Because of this, the various superpowers were even more afraid of Starlink. Now, Starlink had dispatched 300 Hellfire Legion members to White River City. If they had to fight those players, even Burning Owl's Heaven Piercer team would be annihilated. Vice Guild Leader, Elder Long has contacted me to inform us to avoid conflict with Starlink as much as possible, a level 100, black-clad assassin quietly reported. Aside from sending in the Hellfire Legion, Starlink has posted a bounty on Zero Wing through the Adventure Alliances it supports. Starlink is offering 100 CPs for Zero Wing's elite members and 1,000 CPs for core members. The guild is even offering half of the posted bounty to players who can prove they've assisted with the kills. Moreover, Starlink has declared that this bounty will remain in effect until Zero Wing has been removed from God's domain. What a high price. Even I find it tempting. It seems that Starlink truly intends to go all out. The bounty astonished Burning Owl. He hadn't expected Starlink to be so vicious. Many independent players had joined the adventurer alliances Starlink had established with the various otherworld powers, and among them, many were powerful experts that could even rival superpowers' peak experts. The adventurer alliances' contribution points were quite valuable. Players could use them to purchase combat techniques, weapons, equipment, rare materials, and even legacies. Members could even spend the points to hire a team of experts to assist with quests and dungeons. But those uses paled in comparison to their true value. Once members had accumulated enough CPs, they'd earn a promotion within the alliance, rising from bronze to silver, or silver to gold rank. As one rose through the ranks, not only would they receive a discount on any CP purchases, but at gold rank, they'd also earn a fixed credit salary each month. To top it all off, there were almost no restrictions on these benefits. The policy had lured many independent peak experts and top adventurer teams to join these adventurer alliances. A CP in Starlink's adventurer alliances was worth 3 silver, but players couldn't exchange CPs for coins. Hence, the CP reward for Starlink's bounty on Zero Wing was powerfully attractive to the Adventurer Alliance's members. It was even enough to motivate peak experts. Even a superpower would suffer against this strategy, not to mention Zero Wing. Not even God's Domain's various superpowers had thought Starlink would to go such great lengths to destroy Zero Wing. Meanwhile, when Wuxia, who was raiding a level 95, super large-scale team dungeon in the Ore Empire, heard of Starlink's bounty, it surprised her a little. Vice Guild Leader, I doubt Zero Wing will last much longer now that Starlink is relying on its full strength. Should we take advantage of this opportunity? The Elementalist Jing Yang suggested. That won't be necessary. All we need to do right now is capture the Ore capital city as soon as possible. Everything else is secondary, Wuxia said, shaking her head. However, after giving the matter some thought, she smiled faintly and said, that being said, send someone to keep an eye on Zero Wing. The guild has grown strong enough that its members should force Starlink to reveal its current strength. Understood, Jing Yang replied. Although he was a little disappointed that he wouldn't have a hand in Zero Wing's downfall, he didn't dare disobey Wuxia. He immediately notified some of his subordinates to watch Zero Wing. In Zero Wing's White River City residence, tension had risen among the guild's members due to the news of Starlink's bounty. Everyone was worried about the situation. They wouldn't only have to face Starlink's experts this time. Independent experts from multiple kingdoms and empires were joining this fight. If they were not careful in the fields, they could easily be surrounded and slain. Zero Wing was exceptionally strong and had absolute control over a few maps, but as they reached higher levels, they'd have to explore areas outside of the guild's influence. Leveling up would almost certainly become far more difficult. While some guild members considered continuing their development in a new guild, others noticed that the guild residence had a new teleportation point. Quick look. We can teleport to Stone Forest City again. Crap, there's a level 98 requirement, and the guild transfer scrolls cost 500 GCPs each. Wait, something's not right. Stone Forest City has been moved to the Cold Spring Forest? Cold Spring Forest, a level 100 neutral map. What? Stone Forest City is located in a level 100 neutral map now. When they saw the residence's new teleportation point, everyone was dumbfounded. They had never thought the guild would transfer Stone Forest City to a level 100 neutral map. Even the various superpowers only dreamed of accomplishing such a feat. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Some of the level 98 guild members gritted their teeth as they purchased a guild transfer scroll for Stone Forest City. Curious, they activated the scrolls the moment they received them. As soon as these level 98 members arrived in the city's residence, they were stunned by what Stone Forest City had to offer. Not only were their 5 senses sharper within the city, but they also spotted plenty of neutral NPCs selling level 100 weapons and equipment. Most importantly, they sensed the chaotic energy that corroded their bodies dissipating twice as fast as normal. With Stone Forest City's unique environment, it was a leveling haven. Shortly after Zero Wing's members arrived in Stone Forest City, they spread the news throughout the guild, causing an uproar. Naturally, the spies within Zero Wing reported to their respective superiors immediately. Chapter 2377 Enviable Stone Forest City. When they received the reports about Stone Forest City's new location, the various superpowers nearly went mad. Impossible! I thought we needed to raid team dungeons in level 100 neutral maps before we could obtain a town transfer token for those maps. Damn it! Zero Wing was actually able to do it. I want this investigated. We need to find out how Zero Wing accomplished this feat. When the various superpowers discovered Stone Forest Town's new location, the joy they had felt over Zero Wing's misfortune vanished instantly. Now, only envy and admiration remained. The various superpowers were desperate for means to accelerate their exploration in level 100 neutral maps. Unfortunately, they had found nothing and their teams were helpless against these maps' environments and monsters, yet the areas were the future of God's domain. Players could earn significantly more EXP from the monsters in those maps than monsters in lower-level maps. In addition, level 100 maps were the only sources of level 100 weapons and equipment at this point. The various superpowers could only afford to send a large number of players to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests once they had a sufficient amount of level 100 weapons and equipment. Moreover, fighting the monsters in level 100 neutral maps would be very helpful to players trying to improve their combat standards. Lower-level monsters were almost entirely different creatures after all. Now that Stone Forest City was located in a level 100 neutral map, Zero Wing had an unimaginably massive advantage. Meanwhile, in the Dark Knight Empire's Dark Knight City, it's no wonder why Zero Wing dared to sever one of Starlink's main income sources. So, the guild still had such a card to play, illusory words muttered, shock and envy flashing in her eyes. A guild city in a level 100 neutral map would do more than increase the guild members' leveling speed, it could also become a new source of resources for the guild. Level 100 neutral maps had more abundant resources than level 90+ maps, and these resources catered to level 100 players. The advantage these resources would provide was imposingly large. With Stone Forest City's new location, Starlink would likely be rendered powerless against Zero Wing. The two guilds were no longer playing on the same field. Even if Starlink could target Zero Wing via its various adventurer alliances, the tactic would only be effective against Zero Wing's lower-level members. Any level 98+ members could easily avoid Starlink's bounty hunters by relying on Stone Forest City's level 100 neutral map. Moreover, they'd gain far more than they would from grinding in level 90+ maps. At this stage of the game, even mainstream players had reached level 95. Needless to say, Zero Wing's members, who were known for their high quality, would have reached higher levels. And the idea of Starlink targeting Zero Wing in a level 100 neutral map was a joke. If Starlink attacked Zero Wing in the Cold Spring Forest, Zero Wing could rely on its city's inherent advantages to beat its enemy to a pulp. Trying to sever Zero Wing from its resource sources was even more laughable. The various powers shops might still need lower-level resources, but they needed level 100+ resources far more. If Zero Wing were willing to trade these resources for lower-level items, no power would refuse it. Furthermore, Zero Wing still had the secret pavilion support. Stone Forest City will be very helpful to players when they challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests, Vice Guild Leader. If we can secure a temporary residence in the city, we'll have an edge over other superpowers when it comes to nurturing Tier 3 players. The level 100 Berserker beside illusory words realized, glowing with excitement. Players had to conduct their Tier 3 promotion quests in level 100 neutral maps, yet these areas were far too dangerous. Finding the lost Tier 3 legacies was also quite time-consuming. However, if players had a city like Stone Forest City, they'd be able to complete their promotion quests in far less time. I know. Unyielding Soul has certainly secured a huge advantage. When illusory words thought about Unyielding Soul, which had allied with Zero Wing a long time ago, she could not help but envy the guild. Make the necessary arrangements. We're going to negotiate with Zero Wing. I'll get it done immediately, the level 100 Berserker answered. Aside from Crimson Emperor, a few superpowers had considered obtaining a temporary residence in Stone Forest City. Like Crimson Emperor, these superpowers promptly sent representatives to White River City. Nothing was more important to them than helping their players complete their Tier 3 promotion quests right now. Meanwhile, in an Adventurer Alliance's residence in the Fire Dragon Empire, nothing can stop Zero Wing now, Big Sis Jade. Zero Wing actually has a city in a level 100 neutral map. Not even Azure's Demonstone Town can hold a candle to Stone Forest City. The blue-clad assassin youth beside Jade Bamboo exclaimed. So, he was telling the truth. Realization dawned on Jade Bamboo when she read the latest report regarding Stone Forest City. When Shifeng had declared that Zero Wing could nurture Silent Wonder just as well as the Azure Chamber of Commerce and without Azure's resources, Jade Bamboo had found the notion laughable. And yet, times had changed. With Stone Forest City's new location, Zero Wing would have no trouble acquiring the necessary resources to continue its rapid development. Not even the other world's various powers could affect Zero Wing's progression. Meanwhile, in one of White River City's restaurants. How is this possible? Burning Owl felt as if he were dreaming as he read his subordinate's report. Zero Wing had successfully transferred Stone Forest City to a level 100 neutral map, which was something the various superpowers could only dream of accomplishing. Shortly after the various powers had learned about Stone Forest City's relocation, news had spread among the game's independent players, particularly those in White River City. Stone Forest City is amazing. If I could travel to the city, I'd reach level 100 in no time. That's not the only benefit you could get by operating out of Stone Forest City. One of my close friends is a core member in Zero Wing, and he told me that the city even enhances players' senses. If you train in the city's battle arena, your progress will be miraculous. This won't do. I'm going to take the test to join Zero Wing. The latest news about Stone Forest City inspired many independent experts to join Zero Wing. Aside from the help the city could provide as players challenged their Tier 3 promotion quests, the fact that the city could help players gain more progress when training made it impossible to reject. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. For a time, the independent experts that had hesitated about joining Zero Wing due to the recent incident with Starlink fervently applied to the guild. Some of the independent experts from Starlink's Adventurer Alliances even decided to switch sides, applying to become a Zero Wing member rather than target the guild. Because of Stone Forest City, many independent experts are now applying to join Zero Wing, guild leader. Based on the latest statistics, we've received over 10,000 new applications. Some of them are even from Starlink's Adventurer Alliances, Liang Jing excitedly reported. I doubt even Starlink expected that the experts it sent to attack us would end up joining our guild. Zero Wing had constantly been trying to recruit new members and expand its operations, yet its efforts had yielded limited results. However, due to Stone Forest City's new location, a flood of experts had shown up to join the guild. This would undoubtedly make it easier for Zero Wing to manage its territories. Moreover, since a large number of experts from Starlink's Adventurer Alliances had turned traitor, the pressure on Zero Wing's members in Star Moon Kingdom had lessened considerably. It's too early to celebrate, Shifeng said, chuckling. Since Lu Xinghua wants to play, we'll have to humor him. Spread the news that Zero Wing intends to establish a Star Moon Adventurer Alliance in the kingdom. Any alliance member that reaches the silver rank will have access to Stone Forest City, while gold members will qualify to purchase a private house in the city. Chapter 2378, Popular Star Moon Adventurer Alliance Star Moon Kingdom, White River City. Flashing lights filled White River City's teleportation hall as group after group of players arrived. If one carefully watched these players, they'd notice that many of them wore cloaks embossed with symbols from various adventurer teams. Most were top adventurer teams from other kingdoms and empires. There were even some from other worlds. This is insane. Even Origin Curse, the Dark Knight Empire's third-ranked adventurer team, is making a move. I've heard that Starlink is going all out to eliminate Zero Wing this time. The organization is even offering certain benefits in addition to the current bounty. Depending on how much players accomplish, they can even earn special legacies. Zero Wing's in trouble now. Most experts might have a problem with the environment and monsters in a level 100 neutral map, but peak experts and top adventurer teams shouldn't. I know, right? Getting to the Cold Spring Forest might be easier for Zero Wing's members, but once they're there, Zero Wing's ordinary experts will fall. Besides, exploring a level 100 neutral map is still a problem. Even if Zero Wing sends reinforcements from Stone Forest City, they'll likely suffer significant losses. As bystanders in the teleportation hall watched the various top adventurer teams and peak experts arrive, they were shocked, but they also began to place bets on which would survive to the end, Zero Wing or Starlink. Starlink really knows how to splurge, sending so many peak adventurer teams here. Shifeng, who was still working in the Candlelight trading firm, was similarly surprised when he heard the news. Hiring a top adventurer team to attack a guild in a level 100 neutral map was incredibly expensive, yet Starlink had dispatched so many of them. It had likely paid a high enough price that even super guilds would wince. Guild leader, I just received news that Starlink's Hellfire Legion members are starting to move toward the Cold Spring Forest. By the looks of it, they intend to attack our teams grinding in the area, Silent Wonder, who was grinding for EXP, worriedly reported. Why don't I negotiate with my family to borrow some of their experts? Zero Wings members had Stone Forest City to fall back to, but they still had to leave the city to level up. Unfortunately, Zero Wings foundations were still unsteady. Although an expert could rival a peak expert with the Crimson Sunset, Zero Wing didn't have enough of the sets to match the number of peak experts Starlink had dispatched. Of course, Starlink would suffer tremendously for taking such drastic action, but the organization was supported by the Starline Corporation. It had far more funds and resources than its opponent. Most importantly, several adventure alliances worked for Starlink. If this persisted, Zero Wing's position would become even more disadvantaged. That won't be necessary. You should just focus on leveling up, Shifeng said, chuckling. Starlink's foundations might be vast, but Zero Wing's no weakling. Shifeng wouldn't have dared consider clashing with Starlink directly before he had transferred Stone Forest City to the Cold Spring Canyon, but things had changed. Alright, my team and I will try to reach level 100 as quickly as possible, Silent Wonder said, nodding. She knew that she could only display the Crimson Sunset's full strength by reaching level 100. After Shifeng disconnected his call with Silent Wonder, Liang Jing entered the basic meditation room. Guild leader, I've planned the basic organization and benefits for the Adventure Alliance. The Alliance's residence is ready, as well. We now have residences in White River City, Starmoon City, Zero Wing City, and Stone Forest City. We can begin to recruit members at any time, Liang Jing proudly announced. She brimmed with anticipation and confidence about the new Adventure Alliance Zero Wing was about to establish. Independent players might consider the benefits the other Adventure Alliances offered outstanding, but those benefits were nothing compared to what Zero Wing's Adventure Alliance had to offer. Alright, make the announcement to the public now then. Shifeng nodded. He had wanted to wait until the Azura Adventurer team had grown powerful enough before he established an Adventurer Alliance on the main continent with Azura's help, but since Starlink had bared its fangs, he had no choice but to move his plans forward. With Shifeng's go-ahead, Liang Jing published the news on Starmoon Kingdom's official forums. She also sent her subordinates to manage the recruitment at the newly established Starmoon Adventure Alliance's residences. In no time, the kingdom was in an uproar. What? Zero Wings establishing an Adventure Alliance? Maybe it's a move to counter Starlink's assault, but Starlink's Adventure Alliances offer incredibly generous benefits. I doubt many people will be interested in Zero Wings. Wait, you're wrong. Look at what benefits the Starmoon Adventure Alliance is offering. Any silver member will have access to Stone Forest City, and gold members will qualify to purchase private houses in the city. A private house? Isn't that a little too generous? So far, Zero Wing has only leased Stone Forest City's houses, yet countless people fought over them. If we could buy one of our own, our leveling speed would skyrocket. That's not all. The Starmoon Adventure Alliance has quite a few residences as well. There's even one in Stone Forest City and Zero Wing City, and members can rest in the residences for free. When the kingdom's independent players saw the benefits the Starmoon Adventure Alliance offered, they were ecstatic. Many even dropped what they were doing and ran toward the recruitment venues. Stone Forest City was the only city in God's domain located in a level 100 neutral map. Countless experts dreamed of entering the city, not to mention purchasing one of Stone Forest City's private houses. Not even the various superpowers peak experts had that privilege. And yet, as long as they became a silver member in the Starmoon Adventure Alliance, they could visit Stone Forest City whenever they wished. For a time, independent players crowded the entrances to the Starmoon Adventure Alliance's residences. These players easily outnumbered those applying to join Zero Wing by more than a dozen times. There were even some peak experts among the crowds. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, the adventurer teams that had come to White River City to target Zero Wing's members began to jump ship, one after another, applying to join the Starmoon Adventure Alliance. The kingdom's various major powers were stupefied. However, they found these results reasonable. How could Starlink's meager resources possibly compare to the benefits Zero Wing offered, after all? Just being able to enter Stone Forest City would give players a massive lead in levels, not to mention the ability to purchase a private house in the city. Who would willingly miss out on the opportunity? Even independent experts from other kingdoms and empires made their way to Star Moon Kingdom when they had the news. The adventurer alliances, the various otherworld powers, controlled rapidly lost members. While the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance's member count ballooned, Shifeng received a message from Kola. Guild leader, we've completed our promotions. Chapter 2379, Overestimating Oneself. They're finally done? Joy blossomed in Shifeng's heart when he read Kola's message. Any player that successfully completed their Tier 3 promotion quest at this stage of the game instantly became an apex combatant. Their combat power would be leagues ahead of Tier 2 players. Not even Tier 2 domain realm experts were a match for Tier 3 players. Now that Kola and the others had completed their Tier 3 promotion quests as well, they could be the guild's spearhead, quelling any troubles that plagued their guildmates. Shifeng would no longer have to spend all day running around and putting out fires, having more time to invest in his own affairs. He still had many important, unfinished quests, but since Zero Wing had been at risk and lacked enough powerful experts to protect it from the various superpowers, Shifeng had been forced to put his quests on hold. Now that Kola and the others had returned, he could return to his quests without worry. Suddenly, Liang Jing contacted Shifeng, nervously informing him, Guild leader, a group of people from Demon Palace wish to discuss business with you. The Demon Palace? Shifeng was confused when he heard the name. What business do they have with me? Demon Palace had been extremely famous during his previous life. Not only had the guild taken over the entire demonic hell world early on, but it had also been one of the few up-and-coming superpowers in God's domains. After years of development, it had grown into one of the few existences that had the power to contend with the 5 great super guilds of God's domain. However, the demonic hell world's planar passage was connected to the Ten Saints Empire, one of the 4 great empires. The Ten Saints Empire was also quite far from Star Moon Kingdom. Teleporting between the empire and the kingdom cost roughly 9 gold per person. Do you wish to meet them? Liang Jing asked. Let them wait in the reception room for now. I'll head that way, Shifeng said. After giving the matter some thought, he agreed to meet with the Demon Palace's representatives. Demon Palace was no ordinary superpower. Although it had yet to reveal its fangs, no superpower would dare underestimate it. The Demon Palace had the support of 2 international corporations and was the demonic hell world's absolute overlord. The demonic hell world was only slightly smaller than an empire, and due to its environment, the players from the demonic hell world were far stronger than those on the main continent. In addition, Demon Palace had developed relatively smoothly since it had no competitors in its homeworld. Even the strongest super guild on the main continent struggled with roadblocks and setbacks, yet Demon Palace had faced no such issues. It was easy to imagine how powerful the guild had become. Most importantly, the easiest way for players to travel to the Western continent was through the Ten Saints Empire. The empire had a dimensional passage, which was the largest and most stable in God's domain, that connected the 2 main continents. This passage also had the least restrictions. Naturally, the Ten Saints Empire's various superpowers had taken control of the dimensional passage after its activation. One of those superpowers was Demon Palace. Because of this, many superpowers petitioned the Demon Palace for partnerships, which allowed the guild to build its strength and influence. At this point, it was only slightly weaker than the 5 great super guilds. Once Shifeng had tidied up his work with the Crimson Sunsets, he made his way to the reception room in Zero Wing's residence. 3 demonic fighters in pitch-black armor quietly waited in the top-floor reception room. Not only were all 3 level 100, but their auras felt as if the demon god himself stood in the room with them. The Tier 2 expert standing guard by the doors shuddered as these auras washed over them. Zero Wing is quite interesting. Despite such weak members, it dares to provoke Starlink. If these core members were in our guild, They wouldn't even be elite members, a white-haired youth said, shaking his head as he eyed the several Zero-Wing core members that had just left the room. They are a little underwhelming, but this is a kingdom after all. It's a miracle that they've grown this strong, a robust 2-3-meter tall, middle-aged man calmly stated. Moreover, Zero-Wing's guild leader has reached Tier 3. It is not without reason that the Vice Guild leader has set his sights on Zero-Wing. Naturally, the Vice Guild leader knows what he's doing. Zero-Wing is lucky our Vice Guild leader has noticed it. Even Starlink's guild leader had to go to great lengths to negotiate a partnership, a tall, slim woman said with a reverent look whenever she mentioned Demon Palace's Vice Guild leader. As far as these three were concerned, neither Zero-Wing nor the prosperous Starlink was of any significance. Only super guilds were worth Demon Palace's attention. While the trio conversed, Shifeng entered the room. However, the three players didn't seem overly interested in him. They only observed Shifeng in silence. Greetings, guild leader Black Flame. I am Evil Qilin, an elder from Demon Palace. The middle-aged man introduced himself. My two companions are the vice commanders of Demon Palace's third trump card legion. Greetings, Shifeng replied. When he sensed the trio's violent auras, he realized that all three were very strong. The middle-aged man, in particular, was likely only slightly weaker than Giant's Heart's White Autumn. If not for White Autumn's sea god's blessing, he wouldn't even be a match for the middle-aged man. May I know what business you have with me? Our Vice Guild leader values the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance and desires a cut of the action. We aren't asking for much of the Alliance's shares, 30% will be enough. In return, Demon Palace will supply Zero-Wing with the demonic Hellworld's rare materials and special legacies, Evil Qilin said. In addition, we would like a temporary residence in Stone Forest City and 30% of the city's shares. In exchange, Demon Palace will step in to resolve the Zero-Wing's trouble with Starlink. I'm sure Starlink will back away out of respect for Demon Palace. With our members garrisoned in Stone Forest City, I'm sure we can provide a sufficient deterrent to the other superpowers if they have ideas of trying to steal the city. Zero-Wing will be able to develop in peace and join the ranks of God's domain's superpowers. Naturally, Zero-Wing welcomes a partnership between Demon Palace and the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance. However, we can handle Starlink on our own. There is no need for Demon Palace to get involved, Shifeng said, chuckling. Shifeng had no intention of parting with a single % of Stone Forest City's shares right now, let alone handing over 30% in exchange for protection. Although you are quite formidable, Guild Leader Black Flame, you are only one person. Meanwhile, thanks to some of the demonic Hellworld's special legacies, Starlink has established the Hellfire Legion, its strongest force. If you encounter 5 or 6 members of the Hellfire Legion, you might be fine, but even as a Tier 3 player, a 100-man team may overtake you. You should reconsider, Evil Qilin said, sneering disdainfully when he heard that Shifeng had no intention of sharing Stone Forest City. He assumed Shifeng must think himself invincible now that he had reached Tier 3, but even Tier 3 players would have to flee from a 100-man team from the Hellfire Legion, not to mention Zero-Wing's other experts. Demon Palace had already shown a lot of respect by offering to help Zero-Wing. Thank you for your warning, Elder Qilin, but I am confident that Zero-Wing can cope with this situation on its own, Shifeng said. If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave. I still have other matters I need to attend to. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After dismissing his guests, Shifeng stood and left the Demon Palace's representatives alone in the reception room. By the looks of it, Elder, it will be impossible to ally with Zero-Wing regarding Stone Forest City. Black Flame is simply too arrogant, the white-haired youth beside Evil Qilin said. However, the Vice Guild leader told us to secure Stone Forest City. What should we do? It's fine. We can wait. Black Flame overestimates himself, but once Starlink takes care of Zero-Wing, I'm sure he'll come to his senses, Evil Qilin said, sneering at the door Shifeng had left through. However, our demands will be much higher once he's desperate. The Star Moon Adventurer Alliance had lured many experts away from Starlink's alliances, But the guild still had many peak experts and top adventurer teams on its side. Starlink also had the Hellfire Legion. With so many enemies at their doors, Zero Wings members shouldn't even think of stepping out of Stone Forest City. Shortly after Evil Cheelant's group left Zero Wings residence, another group of 24 players wearing Zero Wings guild emblems entered. Chapter 2380 Tier 3 Team. Many players waited in Zero Wings residence for their turn to take the recruitment test, making the residence quite lively. Because of the commotion, no one noticed the 24 cloaked Zero Wing members' arrival. At this point, seeing Zero Wings leave or enter the residence in their cloaks had become the norm. Starlink's bounty was no trivial matter, and for poorer experts, killing Zero Wings members for a quick buck was easy. Zero Wings members could only avoid hostile players by hiding their identities with black cloaks, and to enter the guild residences, they only needed to reveal their guild emblems to the members that guarded the entrances. Many of Zero Wings members had begun to take these precautions recently. However, unlike most of the guild's players, these cloaked players didn't stop to rest in the lounge or visit the quest area. They made their way straight to the guild leader's office, where Shifeng had been waiting for a while. Once they entered the office, the 24 players removed their cloaks and revealed themselves. As they did, violent, scorching auras filled the room. Their combined auras could paralyze Tier 2 experts with fear. What do you think, guild leader? We're much stronger than before, aren't we? Kola boasted as he radiated dense mana. Guild leader, don't listen to him. He was the last of us to complete his promotion quest. He just got lucky and constructed an advanced gold mana body with an 80% completion rate, Shadow Sword said. Hey, I'm satisfied with that. At least my mana body is better than yours. I'm happy enough to squeeze into the 8th place on the team. Kola said joyfully. Before they had left to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests, Shifeng had informed them of the importance of their mana body and told them that they should try as hard as they could to earn a gold mana body. Shifeng had also offered tips about the mana body's construction process. Initially, Kola had only aimed to construct an intermediate gold mana body with an 85% completion rate, but during his second try, he had been inspired and constructed an advanced gold mana body. Of their group, only 10 people had completed an advanced gold mana body with a 75% completion rate or higher. Although the difference was only 1 rank, the difference between their stamina and concentration recovery rates was significant. An advanced gold mana body would be immensely helpful to them in the future. An advanced gold mana body with an 80% completion rate? Shifeng was surprised by Kola's achievement. Compared to magical class players, physical class players were at a disadvantage when constructing their mana bodies. Although Kola's combat standards were considerable, he was only averagely talented among Zero Wings main force members. If not for his fragmented legendary shield, he wouldn't have even ranked among the top 15 in the main force with his combat power. Moreover, Shifeng had heard about the tyrant bear Kola's mana body during his previous life. At the time, Kola had only had a basic gold mana body with a 78% completion rate, yet he had still managed to shake Star Moon Kingdom, becoming one of its top-ranked MTs. Now that Kola had an advanced gold mana body with an 80% completion rate, his future strength would undergo a qualitative improvement. Kola's mana body is nothing, guild leader. Boss Tianxing and Big Sis E are even more amazing. Boss Tianxing constructed a 93% peak gold mana body, and Big Sis E constructed a 95% peak gold mana body. Their stamina and concentration recovery rates are ridiculous, Turtledove interjected. Originally, Turtledove had been relatively proud of constructing an advanced gold mana body. After all, Shifeng had told them that the difference between intermediate and advanced rank was considerable. However, Yan Tianxing, Zhao Yueru, Silent Blade, Alluring Summer, and Yulan were so much more powerful. Every one of them had successfully constructed a peak gold mana body. Moreover, the weakest among them had an 80% completion rate. Since Stubborn Bone, who ranked 7th among them, hadn't been able to construct a peak gold mana body with an 80% completion or higher, he had settled for an 89% advanced gold mana body as he ran out of time. Compared to the top 7 players, Cola's achievement was nothing. While the team bickered, Feng received a compilation of their promotion results. He was shocked when he examined the data. Of the 24 players that had completed their Tier 3 promotion quests, the weakest of them had constructed an 80% peak silver mana body. Not even the superpowers of his past had dreamed of such wonderful results. In the past, the majority of the various superpowers experts had been fortunate to construct an intermediate or advanced silver mana body. Second and third-rate guilds had thrown massive celebrations of any of their experts had constructed a silver mana body at all. A silver mana body was the minimum requirement for players to reach Tier 4 or higher, after all. Not even experts from ordinary guilds had dared to dream of acquiring a gold mana body. In fact, players with gold mana bodies were even quite rare in the various superpowers. Every additional expert with a gold mana body had significantly elevated a superpower's status. The advantages of a gold mana body when exploring level 100+ neutral maps were that massive. And yet, of the 24 Zero Wing members that completed their Tier 3 promotion quests, 19 had constructed gold mana bodies. Guild leader, we haven't had the opportunity to test out our new bodies, so I suggest we head to the battle arena. I agree. My body feels too strong. It feels a little strange to move. Since we've already completed our promotion quests, we should spar with each other to get a feel of our new strength. They had been too busy celebrating their success that they hadn't bothered to test their new strength. They hadn't had any good places to do so, either. However, since so many Tier 3 players were here, it was a good opportunity to learn what they could do. You want to test your new strength? Chuckling, Feng said, Alright, it's simple then. Plenty of superpowers want a piece of our Stone Forest City right now, and Starlink has sent a large number of experts to the Cold Spring Forest. You guys can go and test your strength there, and while you're at it, inform Starlink's people that they have no place in the Cold Spring Forest. Even after finding out that Cola and the others had completed their Tier 3 promotion quests, Feng had still worried that they didn't have enough players to deal with Starlink's forces. Initially, he had planned to mobilize the Night Division to teach Starlink a lesson and warn the other superpowers against trying to steal Stone Forest City. However, it seemed that he could save Zero Wing's final trump card. With the superior mana bodies Cola and his companions had constructed, they could move through the Cold Spring Forest unobstructed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Starlink. Wonderful. I've been itching to practice some of the combat techniques I haven't fully mastered yet. Starlink's peak experts should be excellent practice partners. Feng's decision excited the entire team. Although fighting a bunch of Tier 2 experts wouldn't help them properly gauge their new strength, they could use this opportunity to test the effects of their Tier 3 mana bodies in a level 100 neutral map. The 24 main force members then resupplied and repaired their equipment in White River City before teleporting to Stone Forest City. Chapter 2381. Difference in foundations. In one of the quiet stone forests in the Cold Spring Forest, a 100-man team was hunting the level 100+ monsters residing in a canyon here. In front of this team, the level 100 Great Lord ranked three-headed lizard, which posed a huge problem for the teams of major powers, was not a challenge at all. The team thoroughly suppressed the Great Lord and continuously shaved away at its HP. Everyone put in more effort. The boss is nearly dead. A blue-armored man, who looked to be in his 30s, shouted as he blocked an attack from the three-headed lizard using his two-handed hammer. The three-headed lizard could launch attacks simultaneously with all three of its heads. Aside from the two MTs in the team blocking two of the lizard's heads, the hammer-wielding demonic fighter was holding his own against the third of the lizard's heads without losing any ground. If the experts of the various major powers operating within the Cold Spring Forest were to see this scene, their eyes would most likely fall out of their sockets, because this 100-man team was not a guild's, but one made up of independent players. At this stage of the game, level 100 neutral maps were still extremely dangerous for players. Even the main force of the various major powers would have a difficult time surviving in a level 100 neutral map. If they stumbled upon a level 100 Great Lord, they would try to avoid it as much as possible, since defeating such a monster required quite some time. After all, the longer a battle took to end, the higher the likelihood of the battle attracting nearby monsters. If too many monsters joined the fray, a team wipe was guaranteed. This 100-man team, however, had actually taken the initiative to attack a level 100 Great Lord. Moreover, it was perfectly suppressing the three-headed lizard. The team's strength could practically rival that of the exploration teams of superpowers. After a few more minutes of battle, the three-headed lizard finally lost all its HP and collapsed before the 100-man team, the experience bar of every team member increasing by a sizable chunk. At the same time, a few pieces of sparkling level 100 equipment dropped around the three-headed lizard's corpse. Our leveling speed here really is fast. At this rate, I'll reach level 101 in less than 2 days. The leveling speed isn't the most important point. Look at the attributes of the loot. They're on an entirely different level compared to our level 95 equipment. If we can get a full set of level 100 secret silver equipment, our attributes will surpass even those of players geared in level 95 dark gold set equipment. It's too difficult to obtain level 100 secret silver equipment. Normally, only Grand Lords will drop it. Even until now, we've only come across a few Grand Lords, and some of them are too strong for us to raid. Plus, our operation time is very limited. Collecting a full set of level 100 secret silver equipment is simply too difficult. Zero Wing sure is lucky. It actually managed to transfer Stone Forest City to this place. If our Dark Dragon adventurer team could get a resting spot in a level 100 neutral map as well, let alone secret silver equipment, even level 100 fine gold equipment would be possible. We could start challenging our Tier 3 promotion quests. When Dark Dragon's members spoke about Stone Forest City, envy filled their eyes. Compared to players that had yet to venture into level 100 neutral maps, they had a much clearer idea of how valuable a resting spot in a level 100 neutral map was. However, as Stone Forest City was not open to the public, they could only stare at the city from outside. Commander, I heard that Zero Wing has established an adventurer alliance. Silver members in the alliance can enter Stone Forest City. Why don't we negotiate with Zero Wing? With our adventurer team strength, I believe Zero Wing will be happy to recruit us and promote us into a silver-ranked adventurer team right away, a level 100 Dark Cleric said as he looked at the demonic fighter leading the team. Everyone else on the team nodded in agreement with the Dark Cleric's words. Dark Dragon was one of the famous top adventurer teams of the demonic hell world. Dark Dragon might have only 1,000 members or so, but it was fully capable of toppling the main continent's first-rate guilds. If Dark Dragon decided to join Zero Wing's newly established adventurer alliance, Zero Wing would definitely be more than willing to offer Dark Dragon additional benefits. It is indeed inefficient for us to continue like this, Dark Dawn, the commander of Dark Dragon, said after giving the matter some thought. After this grinding trip, a few of you should go and negotiate with Zero Wing. Say that our bottom line for joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance is for us to become a silver adventurer team. If Zero Wing isn't willing to give us that much, then we can forget about any partnerships. In Dark Dawn's opinion, the only benefit of joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance was the right to enter Stone Forest City. If Dark Dragon's members could not enter Stone Forest City immediately after joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance, then there would be no point in seeking membership at all. Meanwhile, as the Dark Dragon Adventurer Team's members were resting, explosions resounded, and dazzling lights appeared a short distance away. Commander, some players are fighting against each other nearby. A ranger that had been monitoring the surroundings suddenly shouted. Who are they? Dark Dawn asked. There aren't many of them. One side is wearing Zero Wing's emblem, so they should be Zero Wing's team. As for the other side, I think it's Starlink's Hellfire Legion, the ranger reported. The Hellfire Legion? It seems Zero Wing's members are in trouble. Dark Dawn frowned at the mention of the Hellfire Legion. As an original inhabitant of the demonic hell world, Dark Dawn understood just how powerful Starlink's Hellfire Legion was. The Legion's members all possessed the demonic hell world's special legacy. This special legacy was something all players inhabiting the demonic hell world wished to obtain. Unfortunately, Dark Palace kept a tight grip on the source of this legacy and would release only a small number to the public. The Dark Dragon Adventurer team had paid a steep price and secured merely a dozen or so of these special legacies. Even so, these special legacies were already more than enough to let Dark Dragon undergo a qualitative transformation and become a top adventurer team in the demonic hell world. Meanwhile, all 1,000 members of Starlink's newly established Hellfire Legion actually owned this special legacy. One could easily imagine how powerful the Hellfire Legion was. "Commander, should we lend Zero Wings members a hand?" the Dark Cleric asked. "If we help them now, our negotiations with Zero Wing should go much more smoothly." "No rush. Let's head over and suss out the situation first," Dark Dawn replied, shaking his head. After saying so, he hurriedly led his team to the scene of the battle. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Stone Forest, one of Zero Wing's core teams was fending off the Hellfire Legion members' assault while desperately retreating towards Stone Forest City. Big Sis wondered, "These people are too strong. At this rate, we won't make it back to Stone Forest City. You should leave us and run." A female druid focused on healing said hurriedly when she saw that the members defending the rear of the team kept getting pushed back. In terms of basic attributes and combat standards, the Hellfire Legion's members were superior to them by a large margin. If not for the complex terrain here preventing the scale of the battle from escalating, as well as the few Zero Wing players geared in the Crimson Sunset, their team would have long since suffered annihilation. However, although they were currently holding off the Hellfire Legion, their deaths were still only a matter of time. "Don't even think of getting away so easily. We've already placed a tracker on all of you." Bright Dawn, one of Starlink's vice guild leaders, shouted. He then commanded, "Everyone, make sure none of them leave here alive." As soon as Bright Dawn said so, 4 Void Realm experts from the Hellfire Legion immediately adjusted to prevent Silent Wonder from escaping. Silent Wonder did not have brilliant silver with her, so she could rely on only the strengthened Crimson Sunset to do battle. As a result, her advantage over the Hellfire Legion members in terms of basic attributes was small. Facing the combined assault of 4 peak experts, even Silent Wonder had no choice but to focus on evading for now. While Silent Wonder was occupied, a few Hellfire Legion members used this opportunity to break through Zero Wing's defensive line and charge at Zero Wing's healers. "Commander, should we make a move?" the Dark Cleric from Dark Dragon asked the demonic fighter. "We don't stand a chance. That's a 100-man team from the Hellfire Legion. Even if we join the fight, we'll only delay the inevitable," Dark Dawn replied, shaking his head. "Although Zero Wing has Stone Forest City, it still doesn't stand a chance against Starlink out in the fields." The demonic hell world special legacy would give a peak expert the strength to contend against an apex expert and possibly even a decisive advantage. Meanwhile, if such peak experts fought in a group, their performance would be even more amazing. Unless Zero Wing's members gained this special legacy or its equivalent, they would not stand a chance against the Hellfire Legion members at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. As Zero Wing's casualties were increasing, however, a loud hum suddenly came from the sky, immediately attracting everyone's attention. When everyone turned to look at the origin of this noise, what entered their sights was a giant crimson vessel made of steel. Before anyone could react, 24 figures jumped off the steel ship. Meanwhile, along with the appearance of these 24 members, Starlink's and Dark Dragon's members all fell into a stunned silence. Tier 3 players. Chapter 2382, Overwhelming Strength. Why does Zero Wing have so many Tier 3 players? The distant spectating members of Dark Dragon felt their minds screeching to a halt when they saw the newcomers. Cola and the others were not wearing black cloaks, boldly flaunting their Tier 3 life aura. When they jumped off the Crimson Dragon flying ship, it was as if 24 primordial beasts had just dropped from the sky. Tier 3 was the goal that all experts dreamed of reaching at this point. Even the old monsters of super guilds had most likely just started challenging their Tier 3 promotion quests. Now, however, Zero Wing revealed that, aside from Black Flame, it had 24 other Tier 3 players. At this moment, let alone Dark Dragon's members. Even Silent Wonder and the other beleaguered Zero Wing members were stunned by this situation, utterly speechless as they stared at Cola and his companions. Silent Wonder, in particular, was filled with an indescribable sense of shock. Originally, she thought that she had already seen through Zero Wing's foundations. She had never imagined that what she saw was merely the tip of the iceberg. With these additional 24 Tier 3 players, Zero Wing could definitely reign supreme over the entire Cold Spring Forest. Meanwhile, gloom descended upon Starlink's members at this sudden development. The imposing aura they exuded before was now nowhere to be found. They also tried to remain as silent as possible, lest they catch the attention of the newcomers. "You punks from Starlink. Weren't you guys having fun chasing our people? Why are you stopping now?" Cola demanded, smirking as he retrieved the Titan shield slung on his back and glancing at the Hellfire Legion members before him. "Cola, why are you wasting words with them? Since they dare ambush our guildmates out in the fields, the only outcome awaiting them is death," Shadow Sword said as he glared coldly at Bright Dawn's team. "Moreover, the sooner we get rid of them, the sooner we can return. The guild leader is still waiting for us to report back to him." Upon hearing Shadow Sword's words, Xianxia and the others nodded in agreement and promptly readied their weapons. They then stalked toward the Hellfire Legion, each step they took making the hearts of the Hellfire Legion members shudder. At the same time, the Hellfire Legion members also started retreating unconsciously. "Vice Guild Leader, what should we do?" The Berserker standing beside Bright Dawn asked anxiously. "Zero Wing has far more Tier 3 players than we anticipated. Our 100-man team can't handle this." The Hellfire Legion had come to the Cold Spring Forest, assuming that Feng would take action against them. Hence, they decided to hunt for Zero Wing's members in teams of 100. That way, even if Feng made a move, they could handle him. Now, however, 24 Tier 3 players had appeared before them. This was totally different from what they planned. Zero Wing. Bright Dawn gnashed his teeth in anger as he looked at the Tier 3 players. "We don't have any other choice. Use all the deification crystals we have. Everyone else, do your best to escape." Even now, Starlink remained considerably fearful of Feng's existence as a Tier 3 player. Hence, the guild had specifically assigned 10 deification crystals to each of the Hellfire Legion's 100-man teams. That way, a team could instantly produce 10 Tier 3 players, enough to take down even an expert like Feng easily. Now, however, their deification crystals would only serve to buy time for the others to escape. After saying so, Bright Dawn and 9 other peak experts of the team took out a deification crystal from their bags and activated it, instantly raising themselves to Tier 3. Immediately afterward, all 10 of them charged at Cola's group. They were prepared to pin down Cola and the others to the best of their abilities and allow the rest of their teammates to retreat safely from the area. To think that Starlink made such preparations as well. Although Zero Wing is powerful, Starlink is no pushover either. "It seems Zero Wing won't be able to just swat the Hellfire Legion," Dark Dawn said, his understanding of superpowers getting refreshed upon seeing Bright Dawn's team use 10 deification crystals. After Dark Dragon became a top adventurer team in the demonic hell world, Dark Dawn had believed that Dark Dragon was superior to the main continent's various superpowers in terms of peak combatants. Looking at this scene now, however, that was not the case at all. Even if Dark Dragon's members had the demonic hell world special legacy, the main continent's superpowers possessed powerful treasures like the deification crystal, which could forcibly promote a Tier 2 player into a Tier 3 player for a short period. "Come!" Cola revealed an excited expression when he saw Bright Dawn and the others becoming Tier 3 players. He then raised his shield and charged forward all by himself, the confidence he exuded making it seem as if the 10 Tier 3 peak experts before him were no different from common monsters. "Coming at us alone?" Bright Dawn sneered at Cola's recklessness. "If you want to die so badly, we'll grant your wish. Everyone, get rid of him first." Although they were at a numerical disadvantage in terms of Tier 3 experts, every one of them was a true peak expert. This was also the reason why Bright Dawn dared harbor the thought of distracting Cola and the others. Now, Kola was actually charging at their group all alone. Even if Kola was an MT, this was simply suicidal. After saying so, Bright Dawn swung the white bone greatsword he wielded. The violent aura of death the greatsword released, transforming into 3 ghosts that flew at Kola. Not only did every one of these ghosts carry 120% of Bright Dawn's strength, but these ghosts were also akin to doppelgangers. Bright Dawn could control them for 10 seconds. Tier 3 Undead Knight skill, Undying Rage. Aside from Bright Dawn, the 2 Tier 3 elementalists positioned behind him also finished casting their spells. Immediately, pillars of fire descended from the sky, and earth spikes shot up from the ground. These attacks perfectly coordinated with the 3 ghosts Bright Dawn summoned, thoroughly sealing off Kola's paths of escape. This scene dumbfounded both Dark Dragon's members and Silent Wonder's group. The power, rapid execution, and coordination the Hellfire Legion's Tier 3 players displayed were simply inhuman. Just when the fire pillars and earthen spikes were about to devour Kola, however, Kola released an angry bellow and executed a powerful stomp on the ground. The resulting shockwave shattered some of the approaching earth spikes. At the same time, he raised the Titan Guard and summoned 8 translucent energy shields around himself. Tier 3 skill, Heavenly Defense. In the next moment, the 8 energy shields stopped the fire pillars and remaining earth spikes, preventing the attacks from damaging Kola. As for Bright Dawn's 3 ghosts, despite their frenzied assault, they failed to break through the 8 energy shields' defensive net. Impossible! Bright Dawn gaped at Kola in confusion. He knew about the Heavenly Defense skill, one of the standard skills of a Tier 3 Guardian Knight. Many Tier 3 NPC Guardian Knights possessed it. It was not an invulnerability skill. The energy shields created carried only 100% of the user's strength and defense. In other words, Heavenly Defense was a skill that provided the user with a more thorough defense. It did not offer any damage reduction effects whatsoever. Now, however, even after receiving multiple Tier 3 attacks, Kola had actually come out unscathed. If Shi Feng were present, he would not have found this situation surprising at all. Setting aside the fact that Kola wielded a fragmented legendary shield, his Tier 3 mana body alone already allowed him to trample pseudo-Tier 3 players like Bright Dawn. The deification crystal did temporarily promote a player to Tier 3, however, the improvements provided applied only to skills, basic attributes, and physique. The deification crystal did not grant players a Tier 3 mana body. Meanwhile, without a Tier 3 mana body, players couldn't fully exhibit the power of Tier 3 skills and spells. In contrast, Tier 3 skills and spells empowered by a Tier 3 mana body would manifest drastically stronger effects. Before Bright Dawn and the other Hellfire Legion peak experts could react to the situation, Kola had already arrived before Bright Dawn and executed Shield Bash. Sensing the incoming attack, Bright Dawn instinctively raised his white bone sword to block the attack. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Boom. Upon collision, Bright Dawn felt as if a truck had just rammed him. His entire person went flying backward, his HP falling by over 40,000. The two sides were on entirely different strength levels. At this time, Zero Wing's other Tier 3 players had also made a move. Similar to Bright Dawn, the Hellfire Legion's other Tier 3 players were overwhelmed in both raw power and agility. Unable to put up any resistance whatsoever against Zero Wing's members, they rapidly lost HP. As for the Hellfire Legion's fleeing Tier 2 players, they were like fragile glass before Yan Tianxing, Yin Lufei, and Zhao Yueru. Every attack the trio from Zero Wing executed would reap at least one life. Rather than fighting experts, the trio felt as if they were slaughtering chicken. The difference in strength drove the Hellfire Legion members to despair. In less than 30 seconds, Zero Wing's members had not only disfigured the surrounding terrain completely but also reduced all 100 Hellfire Legion members into corpses that gradually transformed into particles of light. Chapter 2383. Shocking the continent. Upon seeing the Hellfire Legion members dissipating corpses, the spectating members of the Dark Dragon Adventurer team fell into a daze. So, these are Tier 3 players? Dark Dawn's heart quaked after seeing Cola and the other Tier 3 experts' performance. It was no exaggeration to say that fights between Tier 2 players and Tier 3 players were on entirely different levels. Although Dark Dawn had understood that Tier 2 players couldn't win against Tier 3 players, he had never dreamed that the gap was this massive. Although every member of the Hellfire Legion possessed the demonic Hellworld special legacy, none of the Hellfire Legion's Tier 2 players had lasted more than one hit against Zero Wing's Tier 3 players. The strength of Tier 3 classes completely exceeded Dark Dawn's expectations. From the fight between the Hellfire Legion and Zero Wing, Dark Dawn could tell that Tier 3 players were superior not just in terms of basic attributes but also in reaction speed. A Tier 2 peak expert himself, Dark Dawn could tell that his reaction speed was slower than Cola's and the others by a heartbeat. Although the difference wasn't massive by any means, it was still enough to determine whether one could block an attack or not. This difference was why the Hellfire Legion's Tier 2 players failed to block the attacks launched by Zero Wing's Tier 3 players, and ended up getting killed instantly. After watching the performance of Zero Wing's 24 Tier 3 players, Dark Dawn concluded that even an army of 10,000 Tier 2 experts would suffer annihilation if they tried fighting against these 24 Tier 3 players. At this moment, the other members of Dark Dragon shared similar thoughts. The frightening power and reaction speed Zero Wing's members displayed simply weren't something that could be overcome with numbers. While Dark Dragon's members were quietly discussing among themselves, Cola and the others suddenly looked in their direction. This situation frightened Dark Dragon's members, and they very nearly turned around to flee. "Commander, they're not mistaking us for Starlink's members, right?" The Dark Cleric standing beside Dark Dawn asked worriedly. Having witnessed the combat power Cola and the others displayed, the Dark Cleric was sure that if Zero Wing's Tier 3 experts took action, then Dark Dragon's 100-man team would definitely share the Hellfire Legion's fate. In fact, the Dark Dragon team might die even more quickly than the Hellfire Legion. Now that they had already reached level 100, getting killed even once would pose a significant setback. After all, the amount of EXP required to go from level 99 to level 100 was massive. Moreover, the difference in strength between level 99 and level 100 players meant they would also miss out on many exploration opportunities. "I don't know. We should head over and greet them first," Dark Dawn replied, shaking his head. He then steeled himself to step forward and take the initiative to greet Zero Wing's members. However, by the time Dark Dawn stood up from his hiding place, Cola's group had already collected the items the Hellfire Legion dropped. They then brought the other Zero Wing members onto the Crimson Dragon flying ship and disappeared from the stone forest. Dark Dragon's members breathed out a deep sigh of relief. "They're actually ignoring us?" Dark Dawn could not help a bitter smile when he saw Cola and the others leaving. The Dark Dragon Adventurer team was an existence that even the expert teams of superpowers feared. However, in the eyes of Cola and the others, Dark Dragon's members were akin to common monsters. However, Dark Dawn also understood the perspective of Zero Wing's Tier 3 players. Cola and the others possessed the qualifications to look down on the Dark Dragon Adventurer team. At this moment, Dark Dawn regretted his previous hesitation. Had his team moved to help Zero Wing earlier, they might have been able to form a close relationship with Zero Wing's Tier 3 players. "Commander, they're gone. Should we head back to the canyon?" The Dark Cleric standing beside Dark Dawn asked. "No, we're returning to White River City," Dark Dawn said, shaking his head. "We're returning? But we still have plenty of time before we run out of gas," the Dark Cleric argued. "Returning now will be a huge waste." Level 100 neutral maps were quite distant from NPC cities. Even with the help of a mount, players still took a very long time to reach a level 100 neutral map. Hence, every team that visited the Cold Spring Forest would endure to their very limits before choosing to return. Their team had spent just half of their expected time in the Cold Spring Forest, yet Dark Dawn was already calling for them to return. "We're returning. The sooner, the better. It'll be best if we can join the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance before news regarding this matter gets exposed," Dark Dawn said seriously. Previously, Dark Dawn had still been hesitating over whether he should get Dark Dragon involved in the struggle between Zero Wing and Starlink. After all, the potential risks of siding with Zero Wing were greater than the potential gains. Now, however, he no longer cared about that. 24 Tier 3 players. With this many Tier 3 players, Zero Wing could rule over the Cold Spring Forest with an iron fist. The various superpowers would be crazy to pick a fight with Zero Wing here. Not to mention, Zero Wing also had Stone Forest City as its base. Once news of Zero Wing's Tier 3 players got out, adventurer teams and experts would definitely flock to the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance. Hence, Dark Dragon had to join the alliance before that happened and quickly accumulate CPs to raise its position in the alliance. After all, once the demand for the alliance's CPs increased, acquiring CPs would become more difficult. The Dark Cleric immediately understood what his commander meant, following which, Dark Dragon's members hurried back to White River City. Meanwhile, shortly after the Dark Dragon adventurer team left the Cold Spring Forest, the shocking news that a 100-man team from Starlink's Hellfire Legion got annihilated reached the ears of the various superpowers. A 100-man team from the Hellfire Legion got annihilated? 24 Tier 3 players? How is this possible? Burning Owl, who was currently raiding a field boss, was astonished as he read the report his subordinate just sent him. Starlink's Hellfire Legion had shocked the various superpowers with its might. Even Burning Owl was not confident that his Heaven Piercer team could survive an encounter with the Hellfire Legion. After all, the demonic Hellworld's special legacy was no laughing matter. Now, however, a 100-man team from the Hellfire Legion actually got annihilated. Moreover, Zero Wing now had an additional 24 Tier 3 players. Burning Owl could understand how a monster like Shi Feng had come into existence. After all, as the guild leader of Zero Wing, Shi Feng could utilize all of his guild's resources to go on dangerous and rewarding adventures. Hence, his reaching level 100 and completing his Tier 3 promotion quest so quickly was still within the realm of probability. However, Burning Owl simply couldn't bring himself to believe that aside from Shi Feng, Zero Wing also had 24 more Tier 3 players. After all, even Long Xianglong had just started challenging his Tier 3 promotion quest. Burning Owl himself felt unready to take on the challenge. Shortly after the various superpowers received this information, news of Zero Wing's 24 additional Tier 3 players spread quickly to the ears of the various major powers as well. Over 20 Tier 3 players? How did Zero Wing accomplish such a feat? Amazing! Too amazing! Zero Wing is actually patrolling the Cold Spring Forest using its flying ship, combined with those 24 Tier 3 players. Nobody will dare target Zero Wing in the Cold Spring Forest now. Aside from the various major powers members, quite a few independent experts also heard about Zero Wing's recent achievements and were stupefied by this situation. As for the top adventurer teams that were originally planning to attack Zero Wing's members, they gave up on the idea, especially after seeing the mobility of the Crimson Dragon flying ship. After this incident, the number of players seeking to join Zero Wing and the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance skyrocketed. Guild Leader, the commanders of many top and well-known adventurer teams have just contacted us. They're hoping that we can increase the variety of rare resources we're accepting so that they can earn more points and get promoted to the silver rank a little sooner. Some superpowers also want to form a partnership with us in exchange for letting their members enter Stone Forest City, Liang Jing announced excitedly after contacting Shi Feng. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It seems the actions of Cola's group yielded quite a result, Shi Feng said, chuckling. How are things coming along with Stone Forest City's private houses? Shi Feng had to admit that the deterrent effect of having over 20 Tier 3 players was much greater than just having one Tier 3 player. Now, even the various superpowers that had adopted a wait-and-see approach could no longer sit still. It's done. I've already refunded everyone who asked for one. Currently, we have over 12,000 empty private houses available in Stone Forest City, Liang Jing reported. Make an announcement stating that Stone Forest City will not be opened fully to the public. Candlelight will also be holding an auction for the leasing of Stone Forest City's private houses, and anyone who rents a private house in the city will be able to live in it immediately, Shi Feng said, smiling. Shi Feng had set aside the matter of leasing Stone Forest City's private houses, as the time hadn't been right. However, now that Cola and the others had completed their Tier 3 promotion quest and Zero Wing already had its own night division, including Stone Forest City's current popularity, it was the perfect time to lease Stone Forest City's private houses. Chapter 2384, Accumulating Advantages. After receiving Shi Feng's instructions, Liang Jing posted an announcement on the forums, stating that Zero Wing would be leasing Stone Forest City's private houses. The moment she published the post on Star Moon Kingdom's official forums, the kingdom erupted in an uproar. Everyone had already learned a little about Stone Forest City through the information Zero Wing's members had leaked. They all came to the conclusion that the city was a haven for leveling resources. Unfortunately, players had been forced to gaze at the city from afar, since it had only been open to Zero Wing's members and the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance's silver members. However, now that Zero Wing had announced a way for non-members to gain access to the city, how could anyone ignore it? When they saw the private houses' leasing conditions, however, both the various major powers and the kingdom's independent players gasped. Stone Forest City's private houses were available for rent, but the Zero Wing was only leasing the houses on a weekly basis, not monthly, and the starting bid for the weekly rent was 30,000 credits. The price could easily rival the private house's monthly rent in the bottomless abyss. Zero Wing is too vicious. Although it's somewhat opening Stone Forest City to the public, only players who rent its private houses will be allowed in the city L. But this is an opportunity for independent players like us. If we can win a private house in the upcoming auction, we'll have a much easier time leveling up and completing our Tier 3 promotion quests. Isn't the rent a little too expensive, though? Zero Wing's charging 30,000 credits per week. How can ordinary players possibly afford that rent? Everyone immersed themselves in heated discussions over Zero Wing's latest announcement, and many players considered the private houses' starting bid too demanding. None of the independent players that were interested in Stone Forest City's private houses could bring themselves to accept this price. In contrast, a large number of adventurer teams and guilds began to apply to join the Candlelight trading firm's leasing auction as the news spread. Candlelight's shops in White River City grew overcrowded as these adventurer teams and guilds representatives arrived. Are these people mad? We're talking about 30,000 credits per week. How much of an advantage could they possibly gain in 7 days? A level 40 female player new to God's Domain was confused when she saw the frenzied crowd in the shop. She wondered if all of God's Domain's players had gone crazy. You've only recently joined the game, so you might not realize how valuable Stone Forest City's private houses are. A player's leveling speed in a level 100 neutral map is at least 3 times that of grinding in a level 90+ map. Moreover, level 100 equipment and resources drop in level 100 neutral maps. The various superpowers teams invest dozens of hours each day traveling to and from these maps just to grind, but if they had a private house in the area, they could teleport directly to the map, a level 94 Cursmancer informed the female player. Enviously, he continued, moreover, I've heard that you can accumulate the double EXP buff and slightly accelerate your recovery speed while resting inside Stone Forest City's private houses. All of these benefits can boost your leveling speed. If he had had enough money, he would have applied to join the auction as well. He wouldn't have wasted his time slowly earning CPs in the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance, trying to become a silver member. Meanwhile, inside one of White River City's restaurants, Elder, Zero Wing has over 20 Tier 3 players now. Even Starlink will be helpless against the guild in the Cold Spring Forest now, a handsome man in pitch-black armor reported to Evil Qilin. Anxiously, he asked, what should we do about the Vice Guild Leader's command? Zero Wing's foundations had surprised them. With Tier 3 players' survivability in level 100 neutral maps, not even 10 Hellfire Legions could affect Zero Wing's development, much less the current 1,000-man Hellfire Legion. We've underestimated the guild. Zero Wing is certainly impressive to nurture so many Tier 3 players so soon. For now, we should settle for renting private houses in Stone Forest City, Evil Qilin said, frowning as he read the latest report. Demon Palace only had around 24 members that were preparing for their Tier 3 promotion quest, yet Zero Wing already had that many Tier 3 players. Even if we win some, I'm afraid that it won't be enough, the handsome youth worried. Demon Palace ruled over the demonic hell world and had a massive number of experts under its command. Even if they rented all of Stone Forest City's private houses, they wouldn't satisfy the guild's demand. We're not in a hurry. Very few guild members are capable of challenging their Tier 3 promotion quests right now. A few hundred private houses should be enough, Evil Qilin said, chuckling. However, this decision will haunt Zero Wing. Since the guild has opted out of opening Stone Forest City to the public, it won't last long once the various superpowers members complete their Tier 3 promotion quests. I can't wait to see whether or not Zero Wing can hold on to Stone Forest City. Evil Qilin only expected Zero Wing to rule over the Cold Spring Forest for a short time. How many experts could the guild possibly have that could reach Tier 3 so soon compared to the various superpowers? It would only be a matter of time before Zero Wing was left behind. While the various powers discussed Zero Wing, Shifeng teleported to one of the 10 Saints Empire's border towns with Cola and his team. They then boarded the Crimson Dragon flying ship and flew to the Demonic Wolf Mountains, another level 100 neutral map. The Demonwolf mountain range was a forbidden land south of the 10 Saints Empire, and there were rumors that a ferocious beast, the Dark Battle Wolf, lived there. Even the 10 Saints Empire, one of God's domain's 4 great empires, was afraid of provoking the beast. The Dark Battle Wolf had the strength to rival a Tier 5 Dragon King, a being that could even contend with Tier 6 gods. Moreover, a destructive aura enveloped the entire mountain range. Tier 2 players wouldn't survive more than 3 hours in the area. It was also home to the Dark Wolf race, which had inherited the Dark Battle Wolf's bloodline. They were no weaker than bloodline creatures of the same level and tier. During Shifeng's previous life, not even the various superpowers had dared to venture into the Demonwolf mountain range casually. Why are we here, guild leader? This environment even feels ominous for Tier 3 players. We're not here to grind, are we? Cola asked nervously as he watched the numerous wolf packs roam the forest below the flying ship. Since reaching Tier 3, Cola had felt as if he had the strength to toy with level 100 Great Lords, but when he saw the three-eyed demon wolves below, he sensed the threat of death. The Great Lord-ranked three-eyed demon wolves felt particularly dangerous. Yen Tianxing and the others felt the same and were just as uncomfortable. We're not here to level. These monsters are cheapskates. They give very little EXP and loot. Moreover, those wolves generally move in packs of 500 or more. Even a 100-man, Tier 3 expert team would be dog food here, not to mention our team, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Then why are we here? Yen Tianxing repeated the question. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You know that Zero Wing had so many Tier 3 experts, they could raid level 100 team dungeons, yet Shifeng had brought them to this godforsaken place. We're going to open a portal to the Western continent. Shifeng answered, chuckling. If the various superpowers had so many Tier 3 experts under their command right now, they'd definitely start raiding level 100 team dungeons or powerful field bosses. It was the easiest way to gain more level 100 weapons and equipment, which would enable more of the guild's members to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests, after all. However, Shifeng thought that method was too slow for Zero Wing. His guild didn't have as many experts as the various superpowers, and if he wanted Zero Wing to grow quickly, he had to expend an abundance of resources. The fastest way to acquire these resources was through trade between the two continents. Shifeng hadn't had the ability to travel to the Western continent before, but now that Cola and his team had reached Tier 3, Zero Wing had a chance of opening the portal to the other continent. Naturally, Shifeng would take advantage of this opportunity. Chapter 2385, Western Continent. A portal to the Western Continent? Yen Tianxing and the others turned to their guild leader in astonishment. God's domain's various powers were no longer ignorant of the Western Continent, and a few superpowers had already gained the ability to travel between the two main continents. The resources these superpowers had returned with had made the various powers jealous. God's Domain's continents had very different cultures. Not only did their developmental directions differ, but each continent had largely different resources. Thus, each continent's players could greatly benefit from the other's resources. Based on what Yan Tianxing and his comrades knew, players on the Western continent had very different daily expenditures than those on the Eastern continent. The Eastern continent's players mainly relied on coins as a currency due to the continent's focus on combat techniques. Naturally, relying on combat techniques in battle placed a huge burden on weapons and equipment, and as a result, players spent a lot of their money on repair fees. On the Western continent, players relied on magic crystals more than coins. The Western continent's players focused more on basic attributes and mana use. Thus, they needed magic crystals to strengthen themselves and their weapons and equipment. Of course, magic crystals were a rare and precious commodity on both continents, but due to the Western continent's developmental direction, magic crystals were worth far more there. In contrast, the materials to produce weapons and equipment were much cheaper than on the Eastern continent. If Zero Wing were able to travel between the two continents, it would become a true superpower in no time. That's right. I discovered a hidden clue about a magic gate here, one that's been passed down since ancient times. As long as we activate the magic gate, we'll be able to travel between the continents, Shifeng said, making up a random excuse to avoid suspicion. The various superpowers were desperately searching for ways to travel between the continents, but very few had succeeded. It'd be strange if he discovered a portal by chance. Is the portal stable, guild leader? Luofei eagerly asked. When they heard Luofei's question, the rest of the team perked up in curiosity. None of them doubted Shifeng's word. Players had discovered many of God's Domain's quests and portals through hidden clues. There was nothing strange about one of these clues leading to a portal connected to the two main continents. Rather, everyone was more curious about whether or not the portal was safe. If it were a single-use portal, it wouldn't be of much help to Zero Wing. At most, they could make a quick buck by reselling the Western continent's resources once. However, if the portal were stable, they could continue to make money until travel between the continents became the norm. The difference between the two would be massive. Based on the clue I found, it should be, Shifeng said. Unfortunately, we'll only know how large the portal is once we activate it. The portal they were looking for was stable, or he wouldn't have bothered to travel all the way out here, but since he had never seen or used the portal personally, he didn't know its exact details. On the Eastern continent, the Ten Saints Empire had the most portals that led to the Western continent. Based on what Shifeng knew, there were nearly 10 stable portals in the Empire, and among them, the largest and most stable was under multiple superpowers' control. That was also the portal most players relied on to travel between the continents. After considering Zero Wing's situation, Shifeng had decided that the Demonwolf Mountain Range's portal was the best suited for his guild. This portal was incredibly stable. During Shifeng's previous life, a dark power had secretly controlled it. The public had only learned about its existence after travel between the continents had become more commonplace, and the various superpowers had grown to envy the dark power that had controlled this portal. Shifeng's answer excited his team. The guild really wouldn't have to worry about its development if they could secure this portal. While Shifeng and his players conversed, the Crimson Dragon flying ship reached a frozen lake within the Demonwolf Mountain Range's inner region. A layer of snow covered the frozen lake, which was so large it could easily contain several cities. If the system map hadn't labeled this area as a lake, players would have likely mistaken it for a snowy plain. However, before the Crimson Dragon flying ship began to descend, the team was overwhelmed by an eerie feeling. They looked down at the lake, noticing a large number of frozen humans and beasts. The human sculptures all wore the same armor and clothing, and the weakest among them was Tier 3. If the Ten Saints Empire's players saw these humans' armor, they would have been shocked. The armor and clothing those statues wore were that of the Sacred Brilliance Division, one of the Ten Saints Empire's 7 Mythic Knight divisions. The 7 Mythic Knight divisions had been the Ten Saints Empire's prided source of apex combat power since ancient times. It was rumored that just one of these knight divisions could destroy an entire kingdom. However, these several thousand knights stood, frozen, on the lake below. Based on their positions and expressions, it was obvious that these knights had been frozen before they had even begun to prepare for battle. Those were several thousand Tier 3 NPCs they were talking about. Just thinking about the implications of this made Yen Tianxing and his companions shudder. God's domain operated on a system of cause and effect. A group of Tier 3 NPCs wouldn't freeze to death for no reason. Something must have attacked these Sacred Brilliance Division knights. The scene even dumbfounded Shifeng. According to his information, there shouldn't be any NPCs here, let alone one of the 7 Mythic Knight divisions. All he should have needed to do was repair the magic gate and protect it from the monsters in the lake. Look at that statue, guild leader. It seems to be radiating a faint glow. Blackie said as he pointed at an ice sculpture beneath the flying ship. Unlike the other frozen knights, the sculpture Blackie pointed to glowed with a faint, golden light. It was also dressed more luxurious than the rest and gave off a trace of divine might. The divine might didn't originate from an item, but from the NPC himself. A hero? Shifeng was surprised to see the frozen NPC in question. Heroes were apex beings among the human race, and although everyone knew they existed, meeting a living hero was an extraordinarily rare encounter. Most heroes had died ages ago and only retained a fraction of their original strength. And yet, Shifeng could tell that the frozen hero below him was still alive. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Guild leader, should we check them out? Blackie asked. Let's go take a look. Shifeng agreed after considering the situation. They didn't really have a choice. The magic gate they were after was sealed under the hero's feet. They couldn't avoid approaching the NPC unless they gave up on the magic gate. Shortly after the Crimson Dragon flying ship landed on the lake, a deep, powerful voice addressed the team. Adventurers, might I trouble you to remove this seal? Shifeng, the team leader, then received a system notification. Chapter 2386, Another Inferior Legendary Quest System. Inferior Legendary Quest, Last Night triggered. You have 3 minutes to accept the quest or not. You will not be penalized for refusing the quest. System, if you choose to accept the quest and complete it, you will gain Holy Knight Alba Gray's favor. Alba Gray's favorability of you beyond the corresponding reward will depend on the quest's completion rate. System, if you fail to complete the quest, all basic attributes will be permanently decreased by 100 points. You will lose 5 levels, and your reputation in the 10 Saints Empire will be reduced by 500 points. The system notifications repeated 3 times. He's Alba Gray. Shifeng stared at the frozen, middle-aged man before him in astonishment. The penalties for failing the quest didn't particularly surprise him. In fact, for an inferior legendary quest, the penalties were a bit light. Even epic quests had more severe consequences for failure. What truly surprised Shifeng was the hero's name. Alba Gray. Every player in Shifeng's previous life had known this name. Alba Gray had been one of the 8 famed smiths in the past. Before him, even a talented Grandmaster Forger amounted to nothing. The various superpowers had gone crazy over Alba Gray in the past because only the famed smiths could forge legendary items. The easiest method of obtaining a suitable legendary item was to seek the help of a famed smith. Relying on players to craft such an item was barely a dream. Hence, the various superpowers had done everything they could to gain any of the known famed smiths' favorability. Even Tier 6 God-ranked players would go crazy for a custom-made legendary item. They'd even destroy an entire kingdom to get their hands on one. Unfortunately, gaining a famed smith's favorability was easier said than done. Players would be lucky enough to meet a famed smith, much less earn their favorability. Famed smiths enjoyed even higher status than kings, and even the War God's Temple, one of God's domain's few apex powers, treated such NPCs with great respect. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to earn such an influential individual's favorability. Shifeng had never thought that not only would he meet the legendary Alba Gray here, but he'd even get a chance to earn the NPC's favorability by simply accepting the quest. If the various superpowers of his past life found out about this, they'd kill him out of jealousy. Without any hesitation, Feng accepted the inferior legendary quest. He then received another notification stating that his favorability with Alba Gray had increased by 10 points. The rest of the team was also notified of the quest. Are we really going to challenge this inferior legendary quest? Blackie asked, worriedly glancing at the last night quest's rank. Major Powers' upper echelons, like himself, were very familiar with quest's difficulties. He was beyond feeling fortunate just because he accepted a high-rank quest. Great rewards came with great risks in God's domain. Many major powers had suffered grievously for accepting high-ranked quests that they couldn't complete. Some guilds had even destroyed themselves due to uncompleted quests. Meanwhile, not only was the last night an inferior legendary quest, but it was also in such a dangerous location. Even with Zero Wings 25 Tier 3 players, Blackie wasn't confident in completing the quest. The rest of the team was just as concerned. The weakest monster they had seen in the Demonwolf mountain range had been a level 100 lord, and throughout their journey, they had spotted level 110 plus Great Lords and Grand Lords. Aside from Feng, they were all new to Tier 3. Furthermore, they had yet to upgrade their weapons and equipment. Just standing in the Demonwolf mountain range was incredibly risky for them, let alone trying to complete an inferior legendary quest. The quest rewards are incredible. Not accepting it would be a waste, Feng said, chuckling. He didn't bother to explain his decision, however. We've already reached Tier 3. Even if we fail and lose 5 levels, we can earn them back quickly. Enough worrying. Let's get going. The 10 favorability points they had just gained were far more valuable than the basic attributes and levels they risked losing. Countless superpowers would willingly make such a trade. There were many methods to increasing basic attributes, and gaining levels was even easier. Furthermore, if they completed this quest, they'd gain even more favorability with Alba Gray. Regardless of the outcome, accepting this quest would only benefit players. Only a fool would reject it. Feng then approached Alba Gray, and after a moment of thought, the rest of the team saw their guild leader's reasoning. Now that they had reached Tier 3, their leveling speed was far faster than Tier 2 players. Even if they lost 5 levels, they could recover and maintain their advantage over others relatively easily. Lord Hero, may I know what we need to do to remove your seal? Feng asked Alba Gray. Unfortunately, my night division came across the Jealous Witch at a bad time, and she cursed us, adventurers. Since my comrades lacked the protection and blessings of the gods, they died when they were frozen. Although I am protected by the gods, I cannot fully stop the curse from eroding my body. I ask that you collect some of the mana the Jealous Witch left behind in this land. I will also need you to stop the ice elf, Ulunium, whom the Jealous Witch left to oversee my demise. That will buy me enough time to break free from the curse, Alba Gray mentally relayed. System: Inferior Legendary Quest, Last Night. Quest content: collect 1,000 strands of mana the Jealous Witch left behind in this land to remove Alba Gray's curse. Before removing Alba Gray's curse, you must do all you can to stop the ice elf, Ulunium. You have 10 days to complete the quest. The less time you spend completing the quest, the higher the quest's completion rate will be. Feng's teammate gasped when they saw the quest's contents. Crap, this quest is fraudulent. Blackie's face twitched as he read the quest details. Collect 1,000 strands of mana in 10 days? How are we supposed to do that? They were all familiar with the concept of collecting mana for a quest. Normally, players could complete the task by killing Great Lord rank or higher monsters in a specified location. Although killing level 100 Great Lords might be easy with their strength, collecting 1,000 mana strands within 10 days was a joke. Level 100 Great Lords had incredibly high HP. Even their team would need at least 15 minutes to kill one. Although God's Domain's days consisted of 48 hours, they'd have to grind non-stop for 5 days to complete this quest. To make matters worse, Great Lords only had a chance of dropping the required mana. To put it simply, this quest was the system's way of toying with them. It's no wonder why only a few superpowers had earned enough of the famed Smith's favorability to commission an item. Shi Feng couldn't help his bitter smile after listening to Alba Gray's request. Not even a 100-man, Tier 3 team could complete this quest, especially since players had just recently reached level 100. Guild leader, we should call in all of the guild's experts, Xianxia suggested. That's not a viable option, I'm afraid, Shi Feng said, shaking his head. More help would increase their chances of success, but the Ten Saints Empire was quite far from Star Moon Kingdom. The teleportation fees alone would be a huge burden on the guild, and players would need a long time to travel from the Ten Saints Empire to the Demonwolf mountain range. Most importantly, ordinary Tier 2 experts would have no hope of surviving in this forbidden land. But at this rate, we won't be able to complete the quest, Xianxia insisted. He had considered the same issues with his suggestion, but their team of 25 simply couldn't slay enough great lords within the time limit. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. We're not completely out of options, Shi Feng said after giving the matter some thought. Blackie, contact Melancholic and tell her to gather all of the secret silver guards I asked her to find in White River City's Candlelight trading firm. I'll head over right away. While I'm gone, I want the rest of you to collect as many mana strands as possible. He had already instructed Melancholic Smile to locate high-growth potential secret silver guards for him. He had even shared all of the clues he knew of with her. He had intended to use soul strengthening to upgrade these secret silver guards to fine gold rank and use them to boost Zero Wing's combat power. While secret silver guards could fend off peak experts, they'd be no match for apex experts. The same couldn't be said of fine gold guards, however, especially a full team of them. If they worked together, fine gold guards could slay domain realm experts as easily as playing with children. Secret silver guards? Shi Feng's order confused Blackie. He didn't understand why Shi Feng would want a bunch of secret silver guards, but he did as he was told. Shi Feng then boarded the Crimson Dragon flying ship and left the Demonwolf mountain range, which prevented any form of teleportation in a hurry. Once he was free of the Forbidden Land, he used a return scroll and teleported to White River City's Candlelight trading firm. Chapter 2387, Strengthening the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. White River City, Candlelight trading firm. Compared to the surrounding player-owned shops and NPC shops, the Candlelight trading firm's 21-story shop loomed a giant overseeing the city's business district. Almost every new visitor to White River City gasped when they saw it. The players that focused on their subclasses gave the magnificent building particularly longing looks. These players' reactions weren't simply because White River City's Candlelight trading firm was a 4-star shop, but also due to Zero Wing's latest announcement. All Zero Wing and Candlelight trading firm members could purchase a private house in Stone Forest City with their GCPs. Even the various superpowers hungered after Stone Forest City's private houses, and because of this announcement, the various major powers players envied Zero Wing and Candlelight's members. Even a fool would recognize the immeasurable future ahead for Stone Forest City. Although a level 100 neutral map was very dangerous, there was no doubt that it was an excellent leveling spot for current players. Furthermore, nowhere within God's domain's many kingdoms and empires could match the city's scenery. With one of the city's private houses, one would have bragging rights for life. Unfortunately, securing a permanent private house in Stone Forest City was easier said than done. Zero Wing had no intentions of selling its private houses to outsiders, only lease them. Once the lease ended, players would have to bid for the house in another auction. And yet, as a member of Zero Wing or Candlelight, one could own their own house in the city. Why wouldn't outsiders be jealous? As Shi Feng made his way toward the Candlelight trading firm, his guild emblem, that of Zero Wing's core members, attracted many envious looks, even though he hid his appearance and identity with a black cloak. He's actually a Zero Wing core member? It'd be great if I could get to know him, a level 96 female elementalist said, her eyes glowing brightly as she watched Shi Feng pass by. Nowadays, Zero Wing shone like the midday sun in Star Moon Kingdom and its several neighboring kingdoms. Even other kingdoms' major powers had to show respect for the guild. In addition, countless adventurer teams sought to befriend Zero Wing's core members in hopes of gaining some advantage in the Cold Spring Forest. Isn't he just a core member? What's so great about that? A level 97 male shield warrior said in jealousy. If I were willing to deal with the restrictions, I could join Zero Wing and become a core member too. Even for you, that'd be a challenge, the female elementalist said, shaking her head at the disgruntled shield warrior. I've heard that since Zero Wing has so many members now, they've raised the requirement for elite members to the middle stage of the Trial Tower's 5th floor. If you wanted to become a core member, you'd have to reach the 6th floor's middle stage at the very least. At this stage of the game, players only needed to reach the late stage of the Trial Tower's 5th floor to be considered an expert. There was a huge difference between the 5th and 6th floors. Even in well-known adventurer teams, the experts that could reach the 6th floor's middle stage could be counted on one hand. When he heard the requirement to become a Zero Wing core member, the level 97 shield warrior fell silent. He belonged to a well-known adventurer team from the Black Dragon Empire, and very few of his teammates could reach that stage. He had only recently reached the 5th floor's late stage. He was nowhere strong enough to become a core member in Zero Wing. We've already raised the core member requirements that high? Shi Feng was similarly surprised when he overheard the conversation. To ensure that the guild's core members had enough resources to develop, Zero Wing had limited the number of players that could become core members. The guild only had limited resources, especially the rarer resources, after all. There simply weren't enough to supply an endless number of members. Of course, exceptions could be made for the players that met the guild's high standards. As far as Shi Feng could remember, the minimum requirement to become a core member had been fixed at the early stage of the Trial Tower's 6th floor, with the higher standard of reaching the 6th floor's late stage. If players reached the late stage, they wouldn't have to take part in the core members' monthly elimination competition. But apparently, the minimum requirement had been raised to the 6th floor's middle stage. It was easy to imagine how many experts had recently joined his guild. Shi Feng had to admit that using Stone Forest City to promote Zero Wing had been amazingly effective. Moreover, as time passed, the core membership minimum requirements would become more demanding, and the guild would acquire even more experts. Although Shi Feng was pleased with his guild's development, he felt a little pressured. More experts meant greater demand for resources. If the guild failed to meet these experts' needs, it would only be a matter of time before they left the guild as other powers established towns and cities in level 100 neutral maps. Whether or not Zero Wing grew into a superpower would depend on the guild's income of coins and resources. Considering this issue, Shi Feng hurried toward the Candlelight trading firm. Melancholic Smile had already gathered the secret silver guards she had gone to great lengths to find in one of the top-floor basic meditation rooms. As Shi Feng entered the room, she promptly handed him a detailed list of these guards. Guild leader, after scouring the various kingdoms and empires, I managed to find 16 secret silver guards with very high growth potential. I've secured other secret silver guards as well, but their growth potential isn't as high, Melancholic Smile awkwardly reported as she gestured to the row of guards behind her. Shi Feng had provided her with plenty of clues, and she had utilized the secret pavilion's connections to follow them. However, even after so many days of searching, she had only found 16 secret silver guards that fit Shi Feng's criteria. 16. Shi Feng was ecstatic with her results. Finding secret silver guards wasn't easy. They all had a considerably high chance of reaching Tier 4 after all. Even after 10 years in God's domain, not even first-rate guilds had been able to afford to take a Tier 4 combatant lightly. Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts were far too rare. As for second- and third-rate guilds, they had been wise to fear Tier 4 combatants. Melancholic Smile simply didn't realize how amazing her accomplishment was. Shi Feng instructed Melancholic Smile to continue her hunt for secret silver guards with high growth potential and materials for the Crimson Dragon flying ships. Meanwhile, he snuck the 16 secret silver guards to the shop's second basement floor, where the shop's private warehouse was located. Only the shop's owner had access to this area. At epic rank, the Ancient Gods literature fragment could only strengthen 1 soul per day, but he only had 10 days to complete his inferior legendary quest. At most, he had time to strengthen 9 secret silver guards. He'd never complete his quest with so few fine gold guards. Hence, Shifeng intended to use the Holy Grail to upgrade the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. Since the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment was bound to his soul, which prevented him from trading it or storing it in a warehouse, he had been afraid of upgrading it. It could also drop if he died. If he lost the literature fragment after upgrading it, he would mourn the loss. However, now that he had risen to Tier 3, he was strong enough to protect himself. Now, the chances of someone killing him were extremely low. The Ancient Gods Literature Fragment's abilities were frightening, and if he could evolve it, it'd become an unimaginable benefit to Zero Wing. After carefully retrieving the Holy Grail from its shelf, Shifeng used it to scan the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. A short moment later, a system notification informed Shifeng of the life force required to evolve the literature fragment. He would have to permanently sacrifice 50,000 HP. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You so much. The number took Shifeng by surprise. 4 Tier 2 players, losing 50,000 HP was fatal, and the evolution wasn't even a guaranteed success. If the evolution failed, then he'd lose 50,000 HP for nothing, which was why Shifeng didn't use the Holy Grail casually. However, Shifeng did not consider the issue for long. Compared to the benefits he could gain from upgrading the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment, losing 50,000 HP was acceptable. After all, the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment wasn't an ordinary epic item, and he currently had nearly 1 million HP. Fortunately, HP wasn't particularly important for a swordsman, and Shifeng knew of many ways in God's domain to increase his HP permanently. Evolve! Shifeng growled, gritting his teeth. As he did, the Holy Grail plundered 50,000 HP from Shifeng and converted it into purple-blue smoke that enveloped the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. Chapter 2388, Evolution Effects Suspended in Mid-Air. The Ancient Gods Literature Fragment radiated a golden light as it hungrily devoured the purple-blue smoke. As the literature fragment absorbed more of the smoke, the engraved divine runes sharpened. The surrounding mana began to flow toward the literature fragment as well. After 10 seconds of this, the divine runes on the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment had completed, fully repaired, and it radiated far stronger divine might than before. What a powerful aura! Shifeng began to grow excited as he sensed the literature fragment's divine might. The strength of the divine might meant the literature fragment had been upgraded, and the process was a success. Eagerly, Shifeng clicked to inspect the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. Ancient Gods Literature Fragment, Page V, Epic Rank Item, an ancient parchment that has undergone the baptism of time. The divine runes have been fully restored by the Holy Grail and contain unbelievable power. Summon Heroic Spirit. Sacrifice a portion of the user's soul to summon 18 ancient heroic warriors to do battle. The summoned heroic warriors will be 1 tier higher than the user up to Tier 3. Duration, 12 hours cooldown, 3 natural days. A weakened soul cannot conduct the summoning. Skill 2 Soul Absorption. Absorbs the souls of half-dead creatures for a high chance to generate a drop of soul essence. Cooldown, 3 hours. Stronger targeted creatures increase the chances of generating soul essence. Skill 3 Soul Strengthening. Consume soul essence to strengthen a creature's soul. Cooldown, 3 hours. Stronger targeted creatures require more soul essence for soul strengthening. Skill 4 Divine Resonance. Automatically detects any Ancient Gods Literature fragments within a 1,000-yard radius. This item is bound to the owner's soul and cannot be traded or stored in a warehouse. This fragment also has a chance of dropping on death. Drops on death if in a weakened soul state. Why is it still epic rank? Shifeng was confused when he saw the Ancient Gods Literature fragment statistics. In terms of abilities, the upgraded Ancient Gods Literature fragment was stronger than some of the fragmented legendary items Shifeng had seen. In fact, if the various superpowers found out about the literature fragment's current abilities, they'd likely offer to trade several fragmented legendary items for it. Yet, despite such abilities, the Ancient Gods Literature fragment was still an epic item. It was unbelievable. Sure enough, I'll need to collect more fragments if I want to upgrade its rank, Shi Feng concluded. The ancient gods' literature was a divine tome, which numerous ancient gods had written. It had the power to decimate the heavens and earth. Trying to upgrade a single fragment to fragmented legendary rank was simply unrealistic. However, Shi Feng was satisfied with the results. With the minor strengthening, the literature fragment's summon heroic spirit skill had massively improved. The skill was enough to make him a one-man army. Furthermore, soul absorption and soul strengthening's cooldowns had shortened significantly. Every one of the changes had exceeded Shi Feng's expectations. Most importantly, his ancient gods' literature fragment now had the ability to locate other fragments within range. This effect would make it much easier to compile the fragments. If he could complete the tome, the ancient gods' literature would benefit the guild far more than 4 or 5 more fragmented legendary items. Following which, Shi Feng stored the Holy Grail and turned to face the secret silver guards behind him. These secret silver guards weren't like monsters like Anna and Kite. Each only needed 3 drops of soul essence for their first soul strengthening. Fortunately, Shi Feng had collected over 100 drops, so he could strengthen all 16 secret silver guards at least once. With 16 fine gold guards and Anna and Kite's strength, he could move through the Demonwolf mountain range unhindered. Shi Feng wasted no time as he began to chant the soul strengthening's incantation and target the elementalist before him. A 5-fold magic array, one far stronger than the one that had appeared when Shi Feng had strengthened Kite's soul, immediately appeared under the elementalist's feet. The array even absorbed mana from its surroundings and the void at least 3 times faster than it had with Kite. Very quickly, a fist-sized ball of liquid mana appeared before the elementalist. This ball of mana melted into the elementalist's forehead, and the secret silver guard released a bone-piercing howl. Although the elementalist was in pain, Shi Feng could clearly sense the guard's aura rapidly growing stronger. This excruciating process continued for 5 seconds. By the time the ball of liquid mana and the elementalist had merged completely, the elementalist felt like a completely different person. To Shi Feng, the level 103, Tier 3 Great Mage had only felt slightly threatening, but now, even he'd have to tread carefully in a fight with this NPC. This NPC improved so drastically. Shi Feng could not believe his eyes when he saw the Great Mage's statistics. Previously, the Great Mage had only had 78 growth potential, which was considerably high for a Secret Silver Guard. Secret Silver Guard's growth potential only ranged between 71 and 80, and this Great Mage had only been 3 points away from Fine Gold rank. When Shi Feng used Soul Strengthening on Kite, the NPC's growth potential had only risen by 2 points. While Shi Feng had expected a greater increase for a Secret Silver Guard, he had only expected a 3 or 4 point increase at best. However, the Great Mage's growth potential had risen by 5 points, to 83. The Great Mage had crossed the Fine Gold threshold and more. Every additional point of growth potential was significant to personal guards. At 83, a personal guard could perfectly suppress an apex expert of the same level and tier. Shi Feng couldn't help his growing excitement. With the Ancient Gods Literature Fragment's new strength, he could even elevate Secret Silver Guards with 76 growth potential to Fine Gold rank. Now, Zero Wing could amass a small army of Fine Gold Guards. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shi Feng immediately contacted Melancholic Smile and had her send him the guild's Secret Silver Guards with at least 76 growth potential to the basic meditation room on the top floor. Guild leader, those guards are currently protecting Silverwing Town. I'm afraid that I'll need some time to find temporary replacements and recall them all to White River City, Melancholic Smile said. Of the secret silver guards she had found, she had ordered those that met Shi Feng's requirements to stand guard in White River City. She had sent the rest to defend Silverwing Town in the meantime. Secret silver guards had incredible combat power, and once they reached level 100, they could complete their promotion to Tier 3. They were an excellent deterrent in the Chaotic or Empire. Don't worry about it. Just recall them all here, Shi Feng said. He did not mind waiting. The upgraded soul strengthening still had a 3-hour cooldown, and it would take a full, natural day to strengthen the 16 secret silver guards before him. "All right, I'll start making the necessary arrangements," Melancholic Smile said, not giving the matter much thought. She then contacted the core members that owned the secret silver guards in question. Chapter 2389, Feingold Team. While Shifeng waited quietly for Silverwing Town's secret silver guards to arrive in the top-floor basic meditation room, Liang Jing contacted him. "Guild leader, we've got trouble in the Dark Knight Empire," Liang Jing exclaimed. "The Dark Knight Empire? What's happened?" Shifeng asked when he saw Liang Jing's anxious expression. Although Zero Wing hadn't been developing in the Dark Knight Empire for long, it had received help from Unyielding Soul. Because of that, both Zero Wing's strength and the Candlelight trading firm's business had been progressing relatively smoothly, and thanks to Stone Forest City, more of the Empire's experts sought to join Zero Wing. Moreover, Starlink hadn't been able to do anything drastic against Zero Wing for fear of unexpected attacks from Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor. Hence, Zero Wing's branch in the Dark Knight Empire was booming. Starlink has established a city at the Gloomy Hills, a map near the Gloomy Ruin, a level 100 neutral map. Moreover, Starlink has announced that it is opening the city to all of its Adventurer Alliance's members. Many of the Empire's experts are siding with Starlink because of this, and some experts and adventurer teams that had been thinking of joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance have changed their minds, Liang Jing explained. In addition, the Dark Knight Empire's various major powers have started to side with Starlink. Even Crimson Emperor is considering a partnership. Starlink has also announced that it will lease its new city's private houses with a starting bid of only 10,000 credits per week. Even many of Star Moon Kingdom's major powers and adventurer teams have been discussing the idea of shifting their development to the Dark Knight Empire. The fact that Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor held Starlink back was a large part of the reason for Zero Wing's survival in the Dark Knight Empire. In addition, the Dark Knight Empire's various major powers had sided with Zero Wing to keep Starlink in check. Hence, the most Starlink had been able to do was pressure Zero Wing's territory in the Empire. However, if Crimson Emperor and the various major powers sided with Starlink, the Zero Wing's members in the Empire would be in danger. Furthermore, now that Starlink had a city in the Gloomy Hills, Zero Wing's experts couldn't operate in the level 90+ resource map. Needless to say, this also made it impossible for the guild members to reach the Gloomy Ruin. And with Starlink's bounty still in effect, a large number of independent experts and adventurer teams would target Zero Wing's members. If this persisted, it wouldn't be long before Zero Wing could no longer survive in the Dark Knight Empire. Zero Wing had already grown to a substantial size, and there were only so many high-level maps in each country. The high-level maps available around Star Moon Kingdom weren't enough to fulfill Zero Wing's needs. Although the Cold Spring Forest was rich in resources, very few guild members were strong enough to grind in a level 100 neutral map right now. At this stage of the game, a grinding team would need a peak expert to lead it if it wanted to survive in such an area. Unfortunately, unlike the various superpowers, Zero Wing only had a small number of peak experts. The majority of the guild's players would still need some time to grind in level 90+ maps. Starlink wants to gather both manpower and resources? Shifeng had a rough idea of what the enemy guild planned after listening to Liang Jing's report. Starlink's new city might not be as impressive as Stone Forest City, but it was near a level 100 neutral map. It would also be quite useful to players who wanted to explore the Gloomy Ruin, and Starlink was accepting far cheaper rent for the private houses in its new city. It was enough to tempt many players. However, this wasn't good news for Zero Wing, which needed credits and resources. What should we do, guild leader? At this rate, not only will we earn less income from our private houses, but more experts will target our guild members as well, Liang Jing said. The opportunity to enter Stone Forest City was a large part of the reason that the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance had attracted so many experts, but only silver and higher-ranked members could take advantage of that opportunity. On the other hand, Starlink gave all of its Adventurer Alliance's members access to its new city. Naturally, this would make the Star-Moon Adventure Alliance less attractive to independent experts. Starlink's adventure alliances would also gain more independent experts to target Zero Wings members. Lu Xinglua is sacrificing his new guild city just to deal with us? I guess he really wants this to be a fight to the death, Shifeng said, frowning. Since he wants a war of resources, I'll play with him until he's satisfied. Make the arrangements. From now on, half the number of CPs required to become a silver member in the Star-Moon Adventure Alliance, and will hold auctions for the Crimson Sunsets. However, only silver members and above will be allowed to participate, and the starting bid will be 30,000 magic crystals and 10,000 gold. We're auctioning the Crimson Sunsets? Liang Jing could not help but gasp. But guild leader, those are a part of our guild's foundation. Our guild members also need those to survive in level 100 neutral maps. If we sell the Crimson Sunsets, nothing was more important than one's strength to the various powers and players. If the Star-Moon Adventure Alliance auctioned off the Crimson Sunsets to its members, there was no doubt that experts and adventurer teams would swarm to join the alliance. However, the Crimson Sunsets were an advantage Zero Wings members needed over other players. If they auctioned the Crimson Sunsets to the public, they'd only help other players rapidly improve, which wouldn't benefit Zero Wings' development. It's fine. The Crimson Sunset might be valuable, but it is still a consumable. Moreover, as players reach higher levels, it'll become less valuable. Since the various superpowers experts have started to reach level 100, this is the perfect opportunity to sell the sets, Shifeng said, chuckling. Before this, he would have hesitated to make such a decision, but he didn't mind now. Now, he had an even stronger trump card to assure Zero Wings' advantage in the Cold Spring Forest. The Ancient Gods Literature Fragment. With so many fine gold guards, Zero Wing wouldn't have to worry about the various superpowers peak experts. Giving the matter some thought, Liang Jing agreed with Shifeng. Besides, Zero Wing didn't have a better option to stop Starlink from poaching its potential members. She disconnected the call and immediately saw to Shifeng's orders, publishing a public announcement regarding the Crimson Sunsets auction on the notice boards in the Star-to-Moon Adventure Alliance's residences. When players noticed the announcement, it caused a sensation throughout the Adventure Alliance. Crap. Zero Wing is too amazing. A Tier 2 mana set equipment. If I had a Crimson Sunset, I could challenge my Tier 3 promotion quest right away. The Star-Moon Adventure Alliance's members were astonished when they saw the Crimson Sunset's attributes. None of them had ever thought that Zero Wing would have such powerful equipment. The experts and adventurer teams that had considered joining Starlink's adventurer alliances changed their minds instantly. Some that had even joined Starlink's adventurer alliances already made their way to the Star-Moon Adventurer Alliance after learning about the Crimson Sunsets. Of course, the various large guilds were just as stunned. Is Zero Wing insane? It's actually selling mana set equipment? Zero Wing is probably panicking. Starlink's new city has dealt quite a blow, after all. These large guilds all thought Zero Wing was foolish to sell the Crimson Sunsets. The guild was practically throwing away a huge advantage. Selling the Crimson Sunset might alleviate Zero Wing's current problems, but it wouldn't benefit the guild in the long run. Moreover, once the Crimson Sunsets were no longer useful, the various adventurer teams and independent experts would return to Starlink's side. While everyone discussed the mana set equipment, Shifeng visited his special forging room to produce more of them while he waited for the soul strengthening's cooldown to end. Before long, all 12 secret silver guards with 76 growth potential arrived in White River City's Candlelight trading firm. Including the 16 secret silver guards he already had, Zero Wing would have 28 more fine gold guards in its ranks once he finished strengthening them all. Even 28 secret silver guards would be more than enough combat power for a guild to rule a level 100 neutral map with an iron fist, not to mention 28 fine gold guards. After nearly 2 days, Shifeng had finally strengthened all of the 28 secret silver guards. The smallest improvement had still been a 5-point growth potential increase, while the largest had been a 7-point increase, rising from 79 to 86 growth potential. Even among fine gold guards, 86 growth potential was incredibly rare. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU 28 fine gold personal guards. If the various superpowers of my past knew about this, they'd go mad. Shi Feng sighed ruefully as he gazed at the 2 rows of personal guards before him. If he had had so many fine gold guards under his command during his previous life, he wouldn't have even been afraid of standing up to superpowers, let alone first-rate guilds. Fine gold guards were exceptionally rare in God's domain, and every one of them had the potential to reach Tier 5. If they were provided enough resources, fine gold guards could have up to a 40% chance of completing their promotion to Tier 5. Even among the various superpowers, Tier 5 combatants were apex beings. Every one of them was a priceless treasure. Of course, Tier 5 NPCs were even stronger than Tier 5 players. To suppress a single Tier 5 NPC, one would need several players of the same tier. And now, he had 28 fine gold guards standing before him, waiting for his commands. Chapter 2390E Powerful Guard Team 10 Saints Empire, Demonwolf Mountain Range. After nearly 2 days of fervent work, Shi Feng had produced 50 Crimson Sunsets. When he handed them to Liang Jing, he instructed her to keep 20 sets to gradually auction off in the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance, while the rest would be given to Zero Wings core members. These core members would lead their own grinding teams in the Cold Spring Forest, helping to alleviate the lack of manpower in that area. Shi Feng had taken a break from crafting the advanced mana set equipment after giving his new stock to Liang Jing, and he had made his way back to the Demonwolf Mountain Range with his 28 newly upgraded fine gold guards. Although the Crimson Sunset would help resolve Zero Wings' need for manpower in the Cold Spring Forest, it was a temporary solution. Moreover, Shi Feng was the only person capable of producing the Crimson Sunsets, and he couldn't forge enough of them for Zero Wings members to secure a firm foothold in the Cold Spring Forest. He needed to take care of the root of this problem. The simplest method to do so was to secure a portal to the Western Continent and acquire a large amount of the Western Continent's resources. Crafting level 100+ weapons and equipment in God's domain was an arduous task, especially for Secret Silver rank and above. The required materials were very rare, and obtaining them in bulk was a major challenge. However, through their research, the forgers of Shi Feng's previous life had discovered that they could replace some of the rare materials the Eastern Continent's forgers needed to craft level 100+ Secret Silver and better weapons and equipment with some of the Western Continent's specialty materials. Likewise, some of the Eastern Continent's specialty materials could replace some of the materials the Western Continent's forgers needed. Not only had this discovery allowed the superpowers that could travel between the continents to earn tons of resources and coins, but they had also been able to acquire level 100+ weapons and equipment far sooner than their competitors. Since the various superpowers that had access to intercontinental travel had yet to realize this and were simply using their advantage to earn resources and coins, Shi Feng had to strike while the iron was hot. If he waited until these superpowers learned this secret, it had become far more challenging to purchase the Western Continent's specialty materials in bulk. These specialty materials were essential to crafting level 100+ weapons and equipment at Secret Silver rank and higher, and if this secret got out, the various powers would try to collect and hoard the materials, rather than sell them. If Shi Feng waited too long, he'd only be able to purchase materials from independent players and adventurer teams, which would limit his collection rate. After piloting the Crimson Dragon flying ship through the Demonwolf Mountain Range's outer region for about 15 minutes, Shi Feng finally located Kola and his team, who were engaged in a battle against several hundred battlewolves. After the past 2 days of grinding in the mountain range, Kola and the others had risen to level 101. If the various Tier 2 experts heard that this team could gain a full level every 2 days, they'd be incredibly jealous. However, Kola and his team weren't having an easy time against these battlewolves, especially as they fought the alphas, the two-headed battlewolves. Two-headed battlewolf. Demonic creature, Great Lord, level 108 HP 270, 000, 000/270, 000, 000. Although the two-headed battlewolves had average HP from monsters of their rank and level, these monsters possessed the Dark Battlewolf's bloodline. Their defense and agility were just as high as actual bloodline creatures, and their combat standards were on par with the Trial Tower's 5th floor. If a Tier 2 peak expert tried to take on a two-headed Battlewolf, they wouldn't last more than a few exchanges. Furthermore, the Demonwolf mountain range's wolves tended to move in packs of 300 to 400, and around 24 two-headed Battlewolves led each pack. Although the rest of the Battlewolves were only Lord-ranked monsters, they could even pose a threat to Tier 3 players when a dozen of them worked together. Although Kola and his companions had reached Tier 3, they still had to be careful, or members of the team would fall. The team had yet to upgrade their weapons and equipment and had to rely on their epic weapons and equipment to support them in the fight. If Kola and his team had Tier 3 standard equipment, they'd have no issues taking a pack of Battlewolves out. Check it out. The guild leader is back. Blackie was excited when he noticed the approaching Crimson Dragon flying ship. With only 24 players, their team had faced plenty of trouble while fighting these Battlewolves over the past 2 days. Not even the magical class players' powerful AoE attacks could alleviate the pressure. These Battlewolves were too smart. Once they sensed a player casting an AoE spell, they split up, preventing the spell from hitting too many of them. But if Shi Feng joined the Battlewolves would be much easier to defeat. As the team members looked up at the flying ship, they saw over 24 figures jump from the ship's deck. Every one of those figures' frightening auras made Kola and his companions' hearts skip a beat. NPCs? How are these NPCs so strong? The team was shocked and confused as they stared at the Tier 3 NPCs that had disembarked. The idea of challenging ordinary Tier 3 NPCs no longer fazed them now that they were Tier 3 as well. They had superior combat standards, after all. However, even Yen Tianxing shuddered when he saw the 28 Tier 3 NPCs that had jumped from the Crimson Dragon flying ship. His instincts even warned him to flee. Before Kola and his companions could react, the personal guards charged at the surrounding Battlewolves. Taking the lead, the dozen or so melee NPCs dispersed the crowding wolves with their charge instantly. They even sent the Great Lord-ranked two-headed Battlewolves flying. The magical class NPCs then followed with a round of spells, each dealing over -1 million damage. The Lord-ranked Battlewolves lost 1/3 of their HPs in that single bombardment, while the Great Lords had lost 1/10 of their HPs. The ferocity of the Feingold Guard's attacks easily outshone Iluoface, a Tier 3 magical class player. After about 3 minutes, the 300+ Lord-ranked Battlewolves and 20+ Great Lord-ranked two-headed Battlewolves had been slain, leaving only a bunch of items behind. Kola and the others were dumbfounded. Normally, they needed over an hour to defeat a Battlewolf pack, yet these 28 NPCs had done so in 3 minutes. The difference between their combat power was massive. From his position on the Crimson Dragon flying ship, Shi Feng leveled from 104 to 105 after the battle ended, crossing the first minor threshold after level 100. Where did you find so many powerful NPCs, guild leader? Kola asked once Shi Feng had descended from the flying ship. Yen Tianxing and the others were just as curious, waiting for Shi Feng's reply. An ordinary Tier 3 NPC could serve as a small city's magistrate in God's domain, yet Shi Feng had managed to employ so many of them, and every one of them was extraordinarily strong. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. From what Kola and the others could tell, 5 or 6 of these NPCs would be more than enough to annihilate their team of 24. If they had these 28 NPCs help, they could explore the Demonwolf mountain range without issue. How could I possibly afford the help of Tier 3 NPCs? These are our guild's personal guards, Shi Feng said, chuckling. Personal guards? The explanation stunned Yen Tianxing. How is that possible? Not even Tier 3 personal guards can be this powerful. Yen Tianxing had encountered the guild's Tier 3 personal guards before, and he had been confident of putting up a fight against the guild's Tier 3 secret silver guards. If he faced any of the personal guards standing behind Shi Feng, however, he'd be able to do nothing but flee. Of course, these aren't ordinary Tier 3 personal guards. They are all Feingold guards, Shi Feng continued with a grin. Chapter 2391, Pioneering Benefit, Fine Gold Guards? These are all fine gold guards? Kola and the others gasped and stared with wide eyes at the 28 personal guards behind Shifeng. They all knew how rare fine gold guards were. Not even some first-rate guilds had a single fine gold guard at this stage of the game, and at most, the various superpowers had one or two. The various superpowers treated their fine gold guards like family heirlooms, and when these personal guards reached Tier 3, they'd be treated as a part of the guild's foundation. Fine gold guards were incredibly powerful. Even at Tier 2, they could suppress Tier 2 Apex experts of the same level, and they'd only grow stronger at Tier 3. And yet, Shifeng informed them that the 28 personal guards behind him were all fine gold rank. "You're too vicious, guild leader. If we station these fine gold guards in the cold spring forest, they'd likely frighten the various superpowers to death," Blackie said, his eyes glowing as he gazed at the fine gold guards. Compared to the various superpowers' shock when they had found out that these players had reached Tier 3, the fact that Zero Wing had 28 fine gold guards would be devastating. Every one of these Tier 3 fine gold guards had even greater combat power than Tier 3 Apex experts. In fact, one of these fine gold guards could take on 2 Apex experts at once. Needless to say, these fine gold guards would easily overwhelm peak experts. Now that Zero Wing had so many fine gold guards, the various superpowers would have to seriously consider the potential losses before moving against Zero Wing, even when their experts reached Tier 3. "Alright, let's focus on completing the quest," Shifeng said, chuckling. These 28 fine gold guards might deter the various superpowers from attacking, but if Zero Wing wanted to become truly powerful, it would need to rely on players and resources. There were limits to what a personal guard could accomplish after all. Right? Our quest. With these 28 fine gold guards, we can now raid the wolf dens we avoided earlier. Kola exclaimed. Their team had only dared to attack the battle wolves in the outer region, one pack at a time, but now that they had 28 fine gold guards to help, they could raid the battle wolves' dens. Not only could they collect the mana strands more quickly, but their leveling speed would also skyrocket. "No, we're not going to the dens. We'll move to the Demonwolf mountain range's inner area," Shifeng said, shaking his head as he gestured to the mountains in the distance. There were a lot of battle wolves in the Demonwolf mountain range's outer region, but very few of these monsters were great lords or higher. Even with the fine gold guards, they wouldn't be able to collect the necessary mana strands fast enough. They'd be cutting it close if they stayed in the outer region. The inner region might be more dangerous, but there were far more great lords available in the area, which would allow the team to collect mana strands far more quickly. Guild leader, the inner region is full of level 110+ monsters, including plenty of great lords and mythic monsters, Xianxia said worriedly. Monsters gained a significant basic attribute boost with each level after level 100, and the monsters in the Demonwolf mountain range had even greater combat standards than their counterparts in other areas of God's domain. If their team accidentally encountered a level 110+ mythic monster in the inner region, they'd risk annihilation, even if they had the help of 28 fine gold guards. They had only recently reached level 101, and the personal guards, on average, were only level 103, with a few at level 104. "Relax. We're only going to explore the border between the inner and outer regions," Shifeng said. "Besides, we don't just have 28 fine gold guards on our side." To prove his point, Shifeng pulled 2 summon guard scrolls from his bag and summoned Kite and Anna. After questing on their own for a while, Kite and Anna had reached level 108 and 109, respectively. They were only slightly lower leveled than the monsters in the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region. The team relaxed when they saw Kite and Anna's levels. Although neither of the NPCs had crossed the level 110 threshold, they all knew how powerful these two were. Both had dark gold rank growth potential and were far more powerful than the fine gold guards. With the 30 personal guards, the team was fully capable of raiding level 110+ Grand Lords. Following which, the team climbed aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship and made their way toward the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region. A white mist and constant snowstorms bombarded the inner region throughout the year, limiting visibility. Even Tier 3 players couldn't see farther than 400 yards away. If players were not careful, they could easily fall prey to monster ambushes. However, Shifeng was relatively familiar with the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region, and he piloted his flying ship toward one of the snow-capped forests in the area. Not only was visibility here much better than in other areas of the inner region, but these monsters only ranged between level 110 and 112. Moreover, the wolf packs in the forest tended to keep their distance from each other, so they wouldn't have to worry about attracting too many monsters while they fought. Kola, I want your group to gather the mobs. Tianxing, your group will lure the alpha away from the main group. Everyone else, prioritize the mobs, then target the alpha once they're dead. Shifeng said as he watched a nearby pack. B/B, Two-Headed Frostwolf, Demonic Creature, Great Lord, Level 110 HP 290, 000, 000/290, 000, 000, Frostwolf Chieftain, Demonic Creature, Grand Lord, Level 112 HP 750, 000, 000/750, 000, 000. The wolf pack they faced only had around 200 members or so, 40 of which were Great Lords, and one was a Grand Lord. An ordinary Tier 3 team would have trouble with this pack, but taking these wolves down should be easy for them. Kola, Turtledove, and Yi Wumian immediately split up and approached the pack from different directions. They herded the wolves into one big group before Yen Tianxing, Flying Shadow, and the rest of the assassins on the team ambushed the Frostwolf Chieftain, securing its aggro and luring it away from the pack's protection. As soon as the Frostwolf Chieftain and the pack were separated, Anna and the other magical classes on the team bombarded the Frostwolves with their spells. The remaining melee members then formed a defensive line, preventing the Frostwolves from reaching the ranged players. After 24 rounds of attacks, only the Great Lord-ranked two-headed Frostwolves remained standing. The rest of the Frostwolves lay dead in the snow. With them down, a significant portion of the pressure on the melee classes lifted. After another 10 minutes, every Frostwolf had died, except for the Frostwolf Chieftain. The team's experience bars had risen by a large chunk after killing over 200 Frostwolves, which was a much faster leveling speed than what they had enjoyed in the outer region. They had also acquired 14 mana strands from the Frostwolves. Once Kola claimed the Frostwolf Chieftain's aggro from Yen Tianxing, the team finished the Grand Lord off in less than 5 minutes. Not only did the Frostwolf Chieftain contribute another mana strand, but it also dropped more than 20 items as it died, one of which was a piece of level 105 fine gold equipment. Naturally, the team was excited about their results. After 2 days of endless grinding in the Demonwolf mountain range's outer region, the best loot that had dropped was a few pieces of level 100 secret silver equipment, yet after killing one Frostwolf Chieftain, they had obtained a piece of level 105 fine gold equipment, 2 ranks better than their best prior loot. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. We've gotten lucky. This Frostwolf Chieftain dropped a piece of the Snowfrost set, a fine gold set equipment for magical class players, Shifeng said, smiling at the level 105 fine gold ranked cloth armor he had picked up. The complete set can be used until level 110. Fine gold set equipment was extremely rare after level 100. The standard equipment for Tier 3 players was limited to fine gold equipment after level 100. Very few experts would be fortunate enough to equip a full fine gold set equipment. Aside from the Snowfrost set piece, the Frostwolf Chieftain had dropped 2 pieces of level 105 secret silver equipment. This was definitely a benefit of pioneering the area. Normally, a Grand Lord like the Frostwolf Chieftain wouldn't drop such abundant loot. Guild Leader, since the Frostwolf Chieftain drops pieces of the Snowfrost set, it should drop pieces of other level 105 fine gold set equipment. Based on the results of our earlier scouting efforts, there are several Frostwolf Chieftains nearby. We should kill them all, Yen Tianxing suggested. Mitchum. Everyone, get ready. Kola, lure another Frostwolf Chieftain our way, Shifeng said, nodding. Chapter 2392, level Skyrockets with Feng's command, Kola eagerly left to lure another Frostwolf chieftain. Meanwhile, the rest of the team got into their battle formations with just as much enthusiasm. Although they had reached Tier 3, most of them wore the same equipment they had when they had reached level 100. They didn't even have many pieces of level 100 fine gold equipment on them, much less level 100 dark gold equipment. They had obtained the majority of their level 100 fine gold equipment during their promotion quests. Their epic weapons and equipment might still have been useful at level 100, but the items hadn't grown any stronger after that point. As they continued to level up, these epic weapons and equipment pieces would become increasingly ineffective. If they could get their hands on level 105 fine gold set equipment now, not only would it significantly increase their basic attributes, but they'd also become strong enough to raid level 100 super large-scale team dungeons. Level 100 super large-scale team dungeons were a major turning point for God's Domain's dungeons because they dropped level 100 plus dark gold and epic ranked weapons and equipment. Most importantly, they dropped Tier 3 skill and spell books. They hadn't really understood the importance of skills and spells when they had been Tier 2 players, treating them as supplementary tools for combat. They had mainly relied on their basic attributes, combat techniques, and combat standards in battle. However, they had realized that ideology was no longer useful after reaching Tier 3. Tier 3 skills and spells were no less important than powerful combat techniques. With a player's mana body, Tier 3 skills and spells would display far more power than Tier 2 skills and spells ever could. This was why, despite their inferior combat standards, Tier 3 NPCs could so easily suppress Tier 3 players of the same level. It wasn't a matter of different basic attributes, but the difference in how many Tier 3 spells and skills one had. If they could learn a large number of Tier 3 skills and spells as well, their combat power would reach new highs. Even if they encountered Tier 3 experts with greater combat standards, they'd be able to defeat their opponents. Meanwhile, after fighting alongside the personal guards, Kola and his companions handled the second Frostwolf pack much easier than the first. This time, they hadn't even needed to lure the Frostwolf chieftain away. They had simply bombarded the Grand Lord and its subordinates together. In the end, the team had annihilated the 200-plus Frostwolves in around a dozen minutes. Although the Frostwolf chieftain hadn't dropped any pieces of the Snowfrost set this time, it had dropped the gloves for the Frostwolf set, a 9-piece, level 105 fine gold set equipment for plate armor classes. When the team's plate armor classes saw the Frostwolf set's attributes, a passionate flame burned in their eyes. Crap, that's not fair. This Frostwolf set is so much better than the Snowfrost set. Its 6-piece set effect increases strength by 20% and the set's level limit to level 120. The full 9-piece set effect even upgrades the set by 1 rank. Blackie exclaimed. Nothing was more troublesome than obtaining level 100-plus weapons and equipment for Tier 3 experts like them. Based on the fact that the Frostwolf set could be used until level 120, the complete set ranked at the top even among level 100-plus dark gold set equipment. With the full Frostwolf set, a Tier 3 player would have the basic attributes to even rival ordinary Tier 3 NPCs. The Frostwolf set? Feng was just as shocked when he saw the plate armor gloves that radiated a faint, white glow. The Demonwolf mountain range's Frostwolf set had been quite famous in his previous life. It had been considered one of the top 10 level 120 dark gold set equipment in God's Domain. Even the various superpowers old monsters had coveted the set. However, the Frostwolf set was normally so rare that one could only obtain the pieces by killing the monsters in the Demonwolf mountain range's core, and yet, it had dropped for his team in the inner region. This was unbelievable. Feng's heart started to pound. He immediately instructed the team to hunt for more Frostwolf chieftains. If they could collect a few Frostwolf sets, they'd have no problems raiding level 100 super large-scale team dungeons. The team continued to grind for 7 consecutive days, during which they had practically killed every Frostwolf chieftain in the Demonwolf mountain range's inner region at least once. As a result, Feng had risen from level 105 to 107, while his companions had leveled from 101 to 104. If the various superpowers experts discovered their leveling speed, they'd die from envy. Although the Frostwolves provided a lot of EXP, unfortunately, the Frostwolf set's drop rate was quite low. Even after using Divine Providence before the killing blow, the team had only completed 3 Frostwolf sets. The team had also managed to collect 5 of the Cloth Armor Snowfrost sets and 5 of the Leather Armor Shadowfrost sets. Aside from the set equipment, the team had obtained over 1,000 pieces of level 100 and level 105 Secret Silver equipment, a bountiful harvest. They could now afford to gear a 100-man team fully. As for their quests required mana, they had collected 956 strands in total. They were only a few dozen strands away from their target, and they should have no issues completing their quest in time. Meanwhile, the leasing auction for Stone Forest City's private houses had netted massive profits for Zero Wing. On average, each private house had been rented for 150,000 credits per week. After holding several leasing auctions, Zero Wing had earned over 1 billion credits in profit. Not only had this alleviated Zero Wing's desperate need for funds, but it had also allowed the Heaven's Rumble Training Center to set up quite a few virtual combat platforms in Fenglin City, which, in turn, enabled the guild to recruit more capable internal members. Guild leader, when will you be done with your quest? Recently, Starlink has been expanding rapidly. It also has support from Demon Palace, now. Not only has it recruited plenty of experts, but we're seeing more players ambush our members in the fields. Many of the Dark Knight Empire's powers have also chosen to side with Starlink. Our members are even too afraid to set foot in a neutral map, and to make matters worse, the situation has started to affect our development in Star Moon Kingdom, Liang Jing reported, clearly frustrated. Although they had lured many experts into joining the Star Moon Adventurer Alliance with the Crimson Sunsets, Starlink had countered this by offering even greater benefits. Now, members of Starlink's Adventurer Alliances could purchase the Demonic Hell World's special legacy for far cheaper. The new benefit had attracted many experts. As a result, Starlink had effectively restricted Zero Wing's resource income, which limited the guild members' leveling efficiency since they needed those materials to brew potions and craft special tools that were essential for grinding in high-level neutral maps. Although Zero Wing could purchase these materials through the Secret Chamber of Commerce, it needed coins to do so, which was by no means a worthwhile trade. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ooh, I understand. I'm almost done here. If we need coins, start leasing Stone Forest City's private houses for coins, rather than credits. That should give us enough to hold out for some time, Shi Feng decided after giving the matter some thought. I'll return as soon as I've finished my quest. Liang Jing had no choice but to nod and follow Shi Feng's instructions. While Shi Feng had conversed with Liang Jing, an abandoned, ancient magic array lit with a colorful brilliance in a forbidden land on the eastern continent. As the rainbow of lights faded, several figures emerged from the magic array. Despite the very thin mana in the forbidden land, a dense layer of mana enveloped these several individuals. In fact, due to their arrival, the surrounding mana density had substantially increased. So, this is the eastern continent. Chapter 2393, Demonwolf Mountain Ranges. Secret Demonwolf Mountain Range, Howling Wind Canyon. Shi Feng and his team stood on the mountainside, fighting fervently to fend off a large pack of demon wolves coming up from the foot of the mountain. This pack was larger than any of the Frostwolf packs they had encountered before, with thousands of members. Moreover, every demon wolf was level 110 or higher, including level 114 demon wolves. Many of these beasts were great lords, and there were a few grand lords in the pack. None of the team members could afford to rest lest the demon wolf pack overwhelm them. If not for the fine gold guards blocking the only path up the mountain, and Anna using a magic array to suppress the demon wolves, these beasts would have devoured Shi Feng and his team long ago. Guild leader, this is an amazing place to grind. Pack after pack of these demon wolves are running at us. Our leveling speed here is even faster than when we were grinding frostwolves, Blackie said, grinning when he saw another pack of demon wolves approach the foot of the mountain. I bet we can even reach level 105 in less than a day of grinding here. Compared to when they had grinded frostwolves, Their current leveling speed was on an entirely different level. They had invested a lot of time in their hunt for frostwolves, but they didn't need to chase down demonwolves, which regularly called for reinforcements. They simply needed to station the melee fine-gold guards on the front line while the rest of the team attacked from a safe distance. These beasts are at least level 110. If we stay here, we can maintain our leveling speed until we reach the same level. If we do, we won't even have to fear the various superpowers experts when they catch up to Tier 3, Xianxia said, his eyes glowing with excitement. It was true that Zero Wing had gained a massive advantage when they had reached Tier 3 so early, but Xianxia understood that the various superpowers had far more and stronger experts than his guild. Zero Wing's advantage over the various superpowers was only temporary. Once the superpowers experts finished their promotion quests as well, Zero Wing would be at a disadvantage. He had constantly been concerned about this. Zero Wing's feud with Starlink was still happening, and the various powers invading from the other worlds couldn't be underestimated. Every one of these powers was eyeing the resources in level 100 neutral maps and Stone Forest City. However, this expedition had alleviated some of his concerns. After reaching Tier 3 in God's domain, the basic attributes players earned with each level up wouldn't have as much of an impact on a player's performance as it used to. Rather, weapons, equipment, and combat standards would have a more prominent effect on players' combat power. However, by leveling up quickly, Zero Wing's peak experts would have more time for high-ranked quests, which would allow them to upgrade their weapons, equipment, and combat standards sooner. With a level advantage, they had a chance of contending with the various superpowers experts and stabilizing Zero Wing's position. How can a level 100 neutral map have such a wonderful place? Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw his teammates' passionate expressions after Xianxia had mentioned the possibility of reaching level 110 so soon. There's no lack of monsters in this area, but remaining here will be taxing on our stamina and concentration. We can't stay for too long. Shifeng had already known about this area and its demonwolves, but he hadn't led the team here earlier because of the atmosphere's burden on players' stamina and concentration. Considering those factors, their grinding efficiency here wasn't that much better than grinding Frostwolf packs. Moreover, the Frostwolves dropped better loot than Demonwolves. However, Zero Wing's current predicament wouldn't permit him to remain in the Demonwolf mountain range for long, which had led to his decision to grind the Demonwolves. The team members couldn't help but glance at their stamina and concentration gauges, and just as Shifeng had warned them, they noticed that they were consuming twice as much as they had while grinding Frostwolves. They really wouldn't be able to fight the Demonwolves for very long. Of course, the environment here isn't all bad. It does increase our stamina and concentration consumption rates, but it is also the perfect pace to adapt to our mana bodies and train with our Tier 3 skills and spells. You'll rarely find such an opportunity elsewhere, Shifeng said, smiling when he saw everyone's disappointment. The Demonwolf mountain range was no ordinary forbidden land. It was a prized location for players to train after reaching Tier 3, especially since it was infested with berserk demonwolves. Not only was the map full of chaotic energy, which was much stronger here, but that energy also disrupted mana. It was the perfect situation to help players adapt to their mana bodies. The mana body was the biggest difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3. The mana body could also be referred to as a player's mana pool. Players with mana bodies controlled mana in an entirely different way than players without. At Tier 2, players used the ambient mana to power their skills and spells, but once they reached Tier 3, they'd use the mana inside themselves as well. This was why Tier 3 skills and spells were so much more powerful than those at Tier 2. However, using the mana within one's body wasn't easy. Players would need a certain level of understanding of their own mana body. Meanwhile, players would struggle to use the ambient mana in environments with chaotic energy, and as such, they'd be forced to rely on the mana within them. This was why such environments were so helpful to players as they adapted to their mana bodies. Indeed, I can sense my mana a little more clearly now. The effects aren't as apparent, but I'm finding it easier to use my own mana now, Iluofei said. After she had reached Tier 3, something had felt wrong when she had cast her Tier 3 spells, but she had brushed it off, assuming it was simply due to how unfamiliar she was with her Tier 3 physique. However, it seemed that sense of wrongness had been a result of her lack of control with her mana body, which had limited her ability to cast her Tier 3 spells. When the rest of the team realized this, they adjusted their approach as they attacked the charging Demonwolves. They started to focus on their own mana while they attacked, using this opportunity to adapt. After 2 hours of practice, the team saw significant improvements to their completion rates with their Tier 3 skills and spells. On average, the team members increased their completion rates by 4%, enough to push many of them across the 80% threshold. Lufe, Zhao Yueru, and Alluring Summer improved the most, with all three reaching past an 85% spell completion rate. Everyone on the team grew ecstatic. They had never realized that the Howling Wind Canyon would be such an extraordinary training ground. Even Shifeng managed to learn some new tricks. He had only had a bronze-ranked mana body in the past, and now that he had an epic mana body, the way he conducted mana had changed. Inspired, he could now manipulate his body with greater precision. He even gained a new understanding of his physical control in the real world. By the time the team only needed 19 more mana strands, Kola and his companions had reached level 105, crossing the first minor threshold past level 100. Without hesitation, Shifeng handed the 3 Frostwolf sets to Kola, Turtledove, and Shadow Sword, which gave the 3 a large boost to their basic attributes. The defense and basic attributes are so high. I feel like I can even tank a level 110 mythic monster now, Kola exclaimed as he examined his newfound strength. Shifeng also gave the Frost Shadow and Snowfrost sets to Yen Tianxing and the rest. With their new equipment, these players' basic attributes were only slightly lower than those of ordinary Tier 3 NPCs. Armed with appropriate equipment, the team slew the incoming Demonwolves far faster than before. As a result, they collected mana at a much faster rate. Guild leader, my group is almost out of stamina and concentration, Blackie announced, sounding tired. My group's running out of gas as well, Yen Tianxing added. Although the team members all had high-ranked mana bodies, they couldn't completely resist the effects of the violent mana in the area. If players with a bronze mana body tried to take their place, they would have run out ages ago. Let's retreat for now since everyone's exhausted, Shifeng decided after seeing that they only needed 3 more mana strands to complete their quest. They could easily collect the rest on their way back to Alba Grey. Shifeng then retrieved the Crimson Dragon flying ship for everyone to board and rest. Once they boarded, the team found rooms to rest in and logged out of the game. Meanwhile, Shifeng piloted the flying ship back to the Demonwolf mountain range's outer area. Once he had reached the safety of the outer area, Shifeng received a call request from Liang Jing. Has Starlink done something again? Shifeng asked. It hadn't been long since the last time she had called. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. There's nothing new from Starlink, but I just received a message from Chairman Xiao regarding a problem in the Heavens Rumble Training Center. He says that a group of people has shown up demanding a challenge, and they've already injured quite a few of our advanced disciples, Liang Jing said. Challengers? Shifeng asked, has Master Lei Bao not taken care of them? The Heavens Rumble Training Center had no lack of challenges since so many people wanted to use Heavens Rumble as a stepping stone to earn fame in Fenglin City overnight. However, Shifeng normally let Xiao Yu and Lei Bao take care of these issues. I've heard that Master Lei Bao lost in just 3 moves. Chairman Xiao only contacted me after he had run out of options, Liang Jing said. They even defeated Lei Bao? The news surprised Shifeng. Who is the challenger? Since he had begun training with Zero Wing, Lei Bao had grown considerably stronger. Even among Apex internal force experts, few were his match. No one knows, and the training center is in an uproar over it. Chairman Xiao is hoping that you can send Fire Dance to take care of this, Liang Jing said. No need. I'll visit the training center myself, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Fire Dance and the others were still in the midst of their Tier 3 promotion quest, so leaving their virtual gaming cabins wasn't convenient right now. Moreover, Shifeng was curious to find out who was strong enough to defeat Lei Bao. Chapter 2394, Powerful Assault Fenglin City, Heaven's Rumble Training Center. As Shifeng arrived at Heaven's Rumble Training Center's top-floor training hall, he was greeted by the sight of a large number of people. They were split into two groups, a large group of Heaven's Rumble's disciples and a smaller group of 3 men and 2 women. The training center's members wore tense expressions as they stared at the smaller group on the opposite side of the hall in fear. The 3 men and 2 women appeared quite young. The oldest didn't look like he had even reached 30, while the youngest of these strangers seemed to be in their early 20s. However, these 5 visitors' auras made them stand out. The eldest of the group, a man with even more bulk than Fang Mingyu, the strongest member of the Fang family's younger generation, felt like a volcano. When Shifeng entered the hall, everyone's attention shifted to him. Hallmaster, Lei Bao greeted Shifeng with an apologetic expression. Shifeng had requested that Lei Bao serve as the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's acting hallmaster and continued to supply training resources. The older man had even received quite a few bottles of S-rank nutrient fluids, and yet, a bunch of youngsters had defeated him in 3 moves, and he had been forced to request Shifeng's presence. "How are your injuries?" Shifeng asked, noticing that Lei Bao seemed a bit weaker than normal. "It's nothing serious, just a few minor sprains. I'll be fine after some rest," Lei Bao said. "However, you should be careful. These people aren't ordinary fighters, especially the young man leading the group. His strength is inhuman. He even took my full-powered punch and avoided injury." At this point, Lei Bao was shocked and afraid of the gorilla-like youth leading the small group of visitors. He was extraordinarily strong. Not even a neutralizing grandmaster could take his full-powered hit and emerge unscathed. However, when he had punched that youth, it had felt as if he had hit a steel wall. While Lei Bao informed Shifeng of the recent events, the young woman in a red dress beside the gorilla youth walked over. "We meet again, Hallmaster Shi," the young woman said, smiling faintly. "I hadn't had the chance to introduce myself the last time we met. My name is Fang Shihan, one of Mythology's Vice Guild leaders. I am also the Qilin Corporation's representative. I've come to negotiate a partnership." Mythology. Liang Jing stared at the young woman with wide eyes. Liang Jing was no longer a stranger to the virtual gaming world. After joining Zero Wing, she had thoroughly researched both the virtual gaming world and God's domain in particular. She knew about Mythology, one of the 5 great super guilds in the virtual gaming world. Mythology stood at the apex of the virtual gaming world. However, Liang Jing had never dreamed that the Fang family would have connections with the super guild. Even Shifeng gave Fang Shihan a surprised look. However, he wasn't surprised to hear about Mythology, but because he had never heard about Fang Shihan being one of the super guild's vice guild leaders during his previous life. "Partnership? What kind of partnership?" Shifeng asked. "Mythology's influence in God's domain goes without saying, and I'm sure you can see for yourself the guild's training capabilities," Fang Shihan said as she gestured to the gorilla of a man behind her. Smiling, she continued, "Mythology intends to develop on the eastern continent, and of the various guilds on that side of God's domain, we've deemed that Zero Wing has the most potential. We only require 51% of Zero Wing's shares, and in exchange, the Qilin Corporation will provide capital, while Mythology will provide further training for Heaven's Rumble's members. We'll help your training center rise to fame, which will allow Zero Wing to recruit more talented members." "And if I refuse?" Shifeng asked. "I'm afraid that isn't up to you, Hallmaster Shi," Fang Shihan said nonchalantly. "I know that you've recently become a neutralizing grandmaster and have successfully blocked one of my father's full-powered blows, so I'm sure you're quite confident in your strength. I'm also sure that you're confident that no fighter in Fenglin City can defeat you. But your strength is nothing before Mythology." As soon as Fang Shihan said that, the gorilla youth behind her stepped forward, the intensity of his aura skyrocketing. His muscles bulged, tearing his shirt to reveal the dark copper skin underneath. The youth's aura became twice as strong, and the cold killing intent he radiated even made Lei Bao shudder. "A Henglian Grandmaster!" Lei Bao exclaimed. Training in the Henglian style was already exceptionally difficult, and very few people became Henglian masters. However, once someone mastered the style, they'd even be able to hold their ground against a neutralizing grandmaster. Lei Bao had only heard of Henglian grandmasters before. He could never have guessed that the young man before him, who hadn't even reached 30, would be a Henglian grandmaster. No, his aura doesn't feel complete. He should still be half a step away from becoming a grandmaster, Shi Feng calmly stated after observing the gorilla youth for a moment. As expected of a neutralizing grandmaster, you have keen senses, Feng Shihan said, smiling. No, Matt isn't a Henglian grandmaster. He's not quite mentally developed enough for that yet, but he'll have no issue taking on ordinary neutralizing grandmasters. Do you still refuse to cooperate, Hall Master Shi? She had investigated Zero Wing thoroughly, with a focus on Stone Forest City. As a city in a level 100 neutral map, it was a treasure trove. Once she had learned about that fact, she had become resolved to obtain Zero Wing, no matter the cost. With Stone Forest City under her control, she could rise through mythology's ranks. When he heard Feng Shihan's statement, Xiao Yu began to despair. He hadn't realized the Feng family was powerful enough to elicit the help of a half-step Henglian grandmaster. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although Matt wasn't an actual Henglian grandmaster, he'd have an overwhelming advantage over ordinary neutralizing grandmasters in an official competition. If Shi Feng lost to the older man, the Heaven's Rumble Training Center would be finished. He was the reason that the training center had grown to its current size and fame. If Shi Feng were defeated, Heaven's Rumble would lose everything. Liang Jing watched the exchange with a grim expression as well. Zero Wing required the Heaven's Rumble Training Center to recruit talented members. Losing it would be a major hindrance to Zero Wing's development. I won't make this too difficult for you, kid. I'll accept defeat if you can last 3 hits. If you can't, then you'll hand over Zero Wing's shares, Matt declared before his fist shot toward Shi Feng. Chapter 2395, 3 Palms. Matt's sudden attack surprised everyone in the hall. Sure enough, he can't help himself. Feng Shihan pitied Shi Feng when she noticed Matt's attack. Matt was incredibly talented, and after working with the Hell training system, the last S training system mythology had created, his already violent tendencies had become more prominent. Now, he was a combat maniac. Even in mythology, there were few people who could spar with Matt. With a neutralizing grandmaster before him, the man was naturally eager to spar with Shi Feng. He had recently gotten closer to becoming a Henglian grandmaster and hadn't had the chance to test his strength properly. Before Shi Feng made his decision was the best opportunity for Matt to force the younger man into a fight. Although stopping Matt wasn't impossible, Feng Shihan thought it was necessary for Shi Feng to experience mythology's power. Lei Bao, who stood by Shi Feng's side, felt stifled when he saw Matt's punch. This strike was completely different than the hits Matt had used during their fight. Not only did this punch break the sound barrier, but it also seemed impossible to avoid. Lei Bao thought he could even hear the Grim Reaper call his name. However, just as Matt's hit was about to land, Shi Feng casually took a half step back and rotated his right shoulder as if he had expected the attack. Almost as if an invisible barrier had manifested between them, Matt's punch harmlessly stopped a few centimeters away from Shi Feng's shoulder. What? Did I scare you? Matt quipped when Shi Feng hadn't made another move to stop him. What happened to all of your confidence? Matt was only a half-step Henglian grandmaster, and although he was more physically fit than ordinary neutralizing grandmasters, his mental processing couldn't compare. His senses and reaction speed were just as inferior to that of a neutralizing grandmaster. If a neutralizing grandmaster focused on evading his attacks, Matt would be helpless against them. In fact, if Lei Bao, a peak internal force master, had focused on evasion, their fight would have lasted a lot longer. This was why Matt had deliberately challenged Shi Feng to last 3 of his punches. Otherwise, fighting Shi Feng would be a waste of time. Forget it, Matt. Hall Master Shi can't take your hits. I suggest you face each other in a race. At least that will give Hall Master Shi a chance at victory, the tall, short-haired woman behind Feng Shihan ridiculed. The woman's provocation enraged Heaven's Rumble's disciples. Even veteran neutralizing grandmasters couldn't help to match a half-step Honglian grandmaster's physical fitness, much less Shifeng, who had only recently become a neutralizing grandmaster. Asking Shifeng to take a direct hit from Matt was a joke. Xiao Yu began to move forward to advise Shifeng against falling into the woman's trap. If he fell for it and lost against Matt, Heaven's Rumble's reputation would be in tatters. I never said I wasn't interested. I just don't think those terms are fair, Shifeng said, shaking his head. I have to sell Zero Wings shares if you win, yet you'll just pack up and leave if you lose. What benefit do I get for accepting this challenge? That's simple. Head instructor: sure, if you win, I'll give Zero Wing a 300 million loan, plus state-of-the-art training equipment for the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. I can guarantee that the equipment I have to offer rivals that in the country's top dojos and training centers, Fang Shihan declared, her lips curling into a wicked grin. She reacted as if she had been expecting Shifeng to ask. State-of-the-art training equipment? Xiao Yu's eyes glowed when he heard this. 300 million credits would be a massive boon to the Heaven's Rumble Training Center, but the state-of-the-art equipment would be far more important. The equipment Fang Shihan offered might not be worth 300 million credits, but it was impossible to purchase on the market. Only the supplier's partners had any access. In comparison, the best equipment available to the public was 2 generations behind, which was why ordinary training centers and dojos' disciples couldn't hold a candle to those from top dojos and training centers. If the Heaven's Rumble Training Center could get its hands on this equipment, its facilities would undergo a qualitative transformation. In turn, this would make the training center more attractive to far more people. Shifeng didn't respond immediately, however. What? You're still not satisfied? Fang Shihan chuckled at Shifeng's silence. If that's not enough, state your demands, head instructor. Sure. She already had a good grasp on Heaven's Rumble Training Center's situation. Although Lei Bao normally led the training center, and Heaven's Rumble's members received excellent training, it was nothing compared to the nation's top dojos and training centers, particularly when it came to its training facilities. If Heaven's Rumble acquired state-of-the-art equipment, its facilities would be an excellent promotional tool on their own, luring in far more members. Shifeng had no reason to reject her offer. Zero Wing desperately needed manpower, after all. Fang Shihan assumed that the only reason Shifeng hadn't jumped at her offer was that he wasn't confident in withstanding Matt's punches. Knowing this, she wouldn't give the younger man any excuses to refuse her challenge. Everyone in the hall thought the same. They had already witnessed Matt's power. Everyone would be impressed if Shifeng remained standing after taking a single hit, let alone 3. Since Miss Fang has asked, I only have one condition, Shifeng said, smiling. He must withstand 3 of my palm strikes as well. If you win, Zero Wing will sell its shares. If I win, I want 20 bottles of life potion. For a moment, shocked silence filled the training hall. Are you insane? The tall woman behind Fang Shihan blurted, staring at Shifeng. Hall master. Even Lei Bao gave the younger man an incredulous look. Honglian-style practitioners were not famed for their strength, but for their frightening defense. It was why a Honglian master would dare to fight a neutralizing grandmaster, yet refuse to acknowledge Apex internal force masters. Matt was only a half-step away from reaching grandmaster status in the Honglian style, and as such his skin and bones were as solid as steel. Trying to injure him with human strength was an utter joke. Only bullets could break though his hide now. 20 life potions? Fang Shihan frowned. Life potions weren't like S-rank nutrient fluids. They contained an extraordinary amount of life force. Consuming 1 bottle of life potion would restore youth to an ordinary person, and the potions were in high demand among grandmaster martial artists. Even a major corporation like Qilin Corporation could only secure a small number of bottles. Despite being the Qilin Corporation's princess, Fang Shihan didn't even get that many life potions per year. If Miss Fang thinks this condition is too demanding, we can forget about this challenge, Shifeng mused, chuckling. Neither the credits nor the state-of-the-art equipment was a priority for Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble right now. The organizations would only truly be able to develop further by improving the strength of their current combatants. The life potion was undoubtedly one of the quickest ways for Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble to do so. As long as Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble became strong enough in the future, obtaining state-of-the-art was entirely possible if they were willing to spend a little money, but that wasn't the case for the life potions. They were truly rare items. Not even Lu Xinglua, the Starline Corporation's heir, could acquire many life potions, much less Shifeng. Fine. I agree to your condition. Fang Shihan hissed. Smiling, she continued, but remember, you only have 3 palm strikes. Of course. Shifeng nodded. You really think you can win, kid? Grinning, Matt said, even if I stood here and let you hit me 20 times, you couldn't force me to take a single step back, much less 3. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. However, before Matt could say anything more, Shifeng walked up to him and thrust out his palm. The strike looked light and gentle from an outsider's perspective. It didn't look like it had the power to threaten anyone. That thrust didn't even look like it could injure an ordinary passerby, let alone Matt. However, just as Shifeng's palm was about to connect with his target, the movement changed, leaving 3 afterimages in its wake. A dull sound echoed throughout the hall, and Matt's face lost color until his complexion was a deathly pale. He stumbled 3 steps back, clutching his abdomen as he fell to his knees, unable to speak for a long moment. Chapter 2396, Initial Display of Strength. As Matt knelt, silence momentarily enveloped the entire training hall. The tall woman with short hair, in particular, wore a stiff expression, her mocking words forgotten. Impossible! Matt, what happened? Mythology's members were dumbfounded by their comrade's reaction. They were all quite familiar with Matt's strength and defense, but they also knew his personality. Thus, they knew this wasn't an act. Shifeng's palm strike had looked gentle. It hadn't even seemed powerful enough to injure an ordinary person, much less a Honglian expert like Matt, yet after taking the hit, Matt had collapsed with his pale face twisted in pain. The strike had clearly left him with substantial injuries. Even Lei Bao and Heaven's Rumble's disciples gaped in shock, not to mention Fang Shihan's group. What did the Hall Master do? Heaven's Rumble disciples were confused. They had already witnessed Matt's strength earlier, when he had defeated Lei Bao in 3 moves. The man had such high defense that he had taken a full-powered blow from Lei Bao without issue, and yet, he couldn't cope with one of Shifeng's gentle palm strikes. Did that guy use some hidden weapon, Vice Guild Leader? How else would he have hurt Matt? A male youth, who was as large as Fang Mingyu, quietly asked Fang Shihan. Aside from the old instructor, who wasn't in the hall, the strongest of Heaven's Rumble's visitors were Matt and Fang Shihan. Since Matt couldn't speak at that moment, only Fang Shihan could inform her companions of what Shifeng had done. The rest of Mythology's group nodded, agreeing with the male youth. They assumed that Shifeng must have cheated. No. He didn't just attack with 1 strike, but 3 instantaneous palm strikes, Fang Shihan said, watching Shifeng with an indescribably grim expression. Moreover, all 3 strikes hit the same location, so it looked like a single attack. His physical control has already reached the spiritualization realm. 3 palm strikes. How is that possible? Their leader's answer stunned Mythology's members. Ignoring the difficulty of striking the same location multiple times, executing 3 simultaneous attacks was an unbelievable feat. They couldn't even fathom what kind of mental and physical reaction speed one would need to accomplish it. That's right, I executed 3 palm strikes, as agreed, Shifeng said, not bothering to hide the truth. He was a little surprised to see Matt so pale, however. Not only does combining 3 attacks allow me to increase my raw power, but it also doubles my hit's penetrating power. To think you only received minor injuries, I'm impressed with your muscular defense. If you had come here a few days ago, I really wouldn't have been a match for you. Adjusting to his epic mana body in the Howling Wind Canyon had inspired him. After he had become a neutralizing grandmaster in the real world, His mind had begun to secrete hormones to fortify his physical prowess. His mental and physical reaction speeds, in particular, had significantly improved, but superior reaction speed wasn't enough for him to exhibit his full strength. His physical control wasn't yet perfect. However, by controlling the flow of mana in his epic mana body, he had come up with some combat techniques that would rely on his reaction speed. Although he couldn't replicate these techniques perfectly in the real world, he was able to exhibit a fraction of the technique's power. Even that fraction greatly increased his strength and penetrating power, allowing him to drive the force of his strikes toward Matt's organs. Not even an adult bear would escape such an attack unscathed. Although Matt was in incredible shape, he was only human. Once his pain had subsided to a bearable level, Matt stood, glaring at Shifeng with a hint of fear in his gaze. He abandoned any thought of fighting the younger man. Very good. I've lost this challenge. Honglian-style practitioners were famed for their brute strength and defense. The only reason that they dared to clash with neutralizing grandmasters was their ability to take a hit without sustaining significant injuries. On the other hand, if they got lucky and landed a bow, they could knock out their opponent with a single hit. However, they'd have to flee from a neutralizing grandmaster like Shifeng, who could ignore their defense. Fighting such an individual would only spell their death. Still, the situation confused Matt. Aside from Shifeng, he had only ever taken such a serious blow from his old instructor. His instructor was an old monster who had become a neutralizing grandmaster several decades ago. The old instructor had also received help from plenty of state-of-the-art and medication to grow stronger. His strength had long since reached inhuman levels. In comparison, Shifeng was only in his early 20s. Just how did this young man become so powerful? In that case, will you fulfill your end of the bargain, Ms. Fong? Shifeng asked after Matt had admitted defeat. After his fight with Matt, Shifeng's mind spun. It wasn't because he had successfully executed a god's domain combat technique in the real world, but because of how impressed he was with mythology's expert standards. He had never thought mythology would be this powerful. If even mythology could nurture such incredible fighters, other superpowers shouldn't be far behind. More than anything, Shifeng needed a large stock of life potions to nurture his own fitness, as well as help Lei Bao and Fire Dance become neutralizing grandmasters. Otherwise, Zero Wings operations in the real world would be in grave danger. The three palms, one strike technique might have looked simple, but it was extremely hard to execute. If Shifeng hadn't mentally prepared himself, and Matt hadn't simply stood there to take the hit, he wouldn't have been able to execute the technique. I don't have 20 life potions on me right now, but I'll have someone deliver them to you before the end of tomorrow, Fang Shihan said, frowning. Shifeng's strength had drastically exceeded her expectations. He certainly couldn't be considered an ordinary neutralizing grandmaster. We have other matters to tend to, so we will take our leave for now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After saying so, Fang Shihan left with her subordinates, and Shifeng didn't try to stop her. Fang Shihan was the Qilin Corporation's princess. She couldn't afford to break a promise she made in public. After Fang Shihan's group left, cheers broke out in the training hall as the disciples celebrated. Everyone practically worshipped Shifeng's display, which had renewed their confidence in the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. Some of the normal members even considered applying to become true Heaven's Rumble disciples. However, the atmosphere in the luxury maglev car parked outside of the training center wasn't as cheerful. We're just going to leave, Vice Guild Leader? I know we only came here to test Heaven's Rumble standards, but wasn't our main goal to compete with the training center virtually and steal its virtual combat platforms in Fenglin City? Shifeng might be strong, but it'll be a different story when we fight in a virtual combat platform. Not even Zero Wings Black Flame will be a match for you with your strength as a Tier 3 player, much less Shifeng, Matt complained. No. We need to report this to the old instructor, Fang Shihan said, shaking her head. No matter how you look at it, it's strange for someone as young as Shifeng to be so powerful. I'm sure there's some big secret to his strength. If we can discover this secret, we'll gain far more authority in mythology. It might even be enough for me to become one of the headquarters' 3 great vice guild leaders. Chapter 2397, Ascension Realm. Fenglin City, Redstone Restaurant. Feng Shihan and her entourage stood before a man in one of the Redstone restaurant's VIP rooms, which had an antique flair. The man sat cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed. Despite the fact that half of the man's hair had already turned white, his facial features were that of a man in his early 40s. In truth, however, he was already over 70. Although this elderly man wasn't as large or robust as Matt and the others, his aura felt like that of an unshakable mountain. Standing in his presence, one couldn't help but revere the old man. This man was none other than Siduqing Tian, Feng Shihan and her companion's instructor. Matt, is Feng truly as powerful as Shihan described? Was he really able to combine the power of his attacks? Siduqing Tian asked as he opened his eyes and looked at the younger man before him. I'm sure of it. The moment after the first hit, his strike's penetrating power doubled. If I hadn't reacted quickly enough and diverted some of the force, he would have likely knocked me out, Matt said, nodding. Before today, he had only ever experienced that level of power from Siduqing Tian, and the memory of Feng's hits were still fresh in his mind. Instructor, I investigated Feng thoroughly, and there were no reports of him possessing this kind of strength. He's only recently reached the Grandmaster realm and partially enhanced his mental capacity. He must have found something in God's domain that has allowed him to execute such a technique in the real world, Feng Shihan surmised. It seems Zero Wing isn't so simple after all. I must have many secrets, Siduqing Tian said. I suspect this Feng has made considerable progress in the realms of truth. He's likely reached the Ascension realm at the very least. The Ascension realm? How is that possible? Matt exclaimed. Mythology had discovered the realms of truth combat system, which had profound principles in God's domain. At first, some of the various superpowers had labeled the realms of truth as the spiritualization realm, and they had discovered that learning these principles allowed one to gain unbelievable control with combat techniques. Learning these principles was akin to engraving combat techniques on one's bones. Players that learn these principles and practice them successfully could execute a combat technique with every movement. They could exhibit strength far beyond their natural potential. However, progressing through the realms of truth was an intense challenge. Even Matt, a genius, had barely begun, yet he was considered one of the most accomplished individuals in mythology. And now, they discovered that Feng, who was much younger than Matt, had gone beyond, reaching the Ascension realm. How could he allow himself to believe it? That is why I am sure Zero Wing has hidden many secrets. Mythology has expended a lot of manpower and resources to explore the realms of truth, yet we have barely uncovered some of the training methods, Siduqing Tian said, his interest in Zero Wing growing. Zero Wing must have obtained some clues relating to the realms of truth and uncovered detailed training methods. No individual could reach such a standard by themselves, otherwise. If that is true, we must obtain this secret. Feng Shihan declared, passion burning in her gaze. Mythology had constantly been searching for the realms of truth's secrets, but the clues they had uncovered were few and vague. Needless to say, they had yet to discover any systematic training methods. If she could get her hands on Zero Wing's training system and combine it and mythology's research, not only could she improve her own combat standards, but she could also gain more authority within the guild. Vice Guild Leader, Zero Wing's roots on the eastern continent are too solid to shake right now, especially now that it has Stone Forest City. I'm afraid that we won't be able to cause any significant damage. Even if we target the Heaven's Rumble Training Center, our results will likely be negligible. At worst, we'll slow Zero Wing's recruitment rate, but we won't be able to harm the guild's foundations directly, Matt anxiously said. He desperately wanted a Realms of Truth training system as well. If he could progress further through the Realms of Truth, not only would he grow stronger in God's domain, but he'd also gain more combat power in the real world. Don't worry about it. Since we now know Zero Wing has obtained clues regarding the Realms of Truth, our guild will not let it out of our sight. I've read through the reports on Zero Wing. It seems the guild is at war with Starlink, and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Rain is part of the reason it has held on for so long, Siduqing Tian calmly stated. If we can interfere and prevent Phoenix Rain from helping Zero Wing, I doubt the guild will last long against Starlink. Shirhan, visit the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and inform Ku Rong of our stance. I'm sure that old fellow will make the wise decision. I understand. I'll get it done once I return, Fang Shirhan said, nodding. She had thought of pressuring the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion too, but she was only a vice-guild leader from one of mythology's many branch guilds. Although she had a good reputation in the guild, she had no authority to represent the guild in crucial matters. Now that she had permission, however, she didn't have to worry about any negative repercussions. Whether or not the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would give in to her demands wasn't even a question. Mythology was one of the 5 great super guilds in God's domain. Even ordinary super guilds had to show it respect, not to mention a super first-rate guild like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Meanwhile, in Zero Wing's main headquarters, once Shi Feng received the 20 bottles of life potion from Fang Shirhan's subordinate, he gave 3 bottles to Lei Bao. He instructed the man to visit the extraordinary tower with the berserker Lei Bao had made for fun in God's domain. After his fight with Matt, Shi Feng had an odd sense of impending danger. Although Zero Wing was developing smoothly in God's domain, it was far too weak in the real world, especially when it came to poaching talented fighters. The various superpowers had already begun to do so on a large scale. However, since Shi Feng was so busy with his affairs in God's domain, he didn't have time to pay attention to Heaven's Rumble's development. If he wanted his training center to grow, he'd need another Grandmaster martial artist to defend it long-term. Among those working in Heaven's Rumble, Lei Bao was undoubtedly the closest to reaching the Grandmaster realm. After him, there were Fire Dance and the others. Lei Bao's physical fitness and control had already peaked, and he was only a step away from breaking into the Grandmaster realm. To make that final step, his mental capacity needed to undergo a qualitative transformation. Although training in the Extraordinary Tower wasn't nearly as effective as training in the Tower of 4 Gods, Lei Bao had a high chance of making that final step with the help of the life potions. Once he became a Grandmaster, Heaven's Rumble would grow at a frightening pace. The training center would also have a much better chance of resisting the various major corporations' harassment. After finishing with Lei Bao, Shi Feng split another 10 life potions among Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, Cola, Shadow Sword, and Turtle Dove, the guild's experts that had already grasped internal force. The life potions should help them develop their physical fitness and mental capacity. Shi Feng then drank one of the life potions before returning to his virtual gaming cabin and logging back into God's domain. He intended to open the portal to the Western continent as soon as possible. Only then could Zero Wing stabilize its foothold in God's domain and secure enough resources and strength to develop the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. By the time Shi Feng re-entered God's domain, Cola and the others were, for the most part, rested and ready. The team resumed grinding in the Demonwolf mountain range's outer region for a while, collecting the last mana strands for their quest. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This quest is a tough one. If not for the fine gold guards, we wouldn't have had any hope of completing it. I wonder what kind of rewards we'll get once we turn it in. Blackie pondered, filled with anticipation as he watched Shi Feng collect the final mana strand. It'd be awesome if we earned a fragmented legendary item. This was the first time they had completed an inferior legendary quest, and they had obtained this quest in a level 100+ neutral map. The quest rewards would definitely be extraordinary. Alright, tidy up. Once everyone's ready, we're leaving, Shi Feng said, chuckling at Blackie's excitement. He did not particularly care about the reward items. He knew that not even an inferior legendary quest had a high chance of granting a fragmented legendary item. Rather, he looked forward to the favorability they'd earn with the famed smith, Alba Gray. In no time, Shi Feng and his team stood before Alba Gray once more. Chapter 2398, Disintegration power, activate. By the time Shifeng's group returned to Alba Grey, the NPC's divine might had weakened considerably. Even with the protection of the gods, the hero was in danger of dying. Seeing this, Shifeng had to admit that the jealous witch was incredibly powerful. With a single curse, she could cause a hero's downfall. With this kind of power and the witch's erratic mood, it was no wonder why she was considered a natural disaster. When she was in a good mood, she could help a kingdom prosper, but when her mood was sour, she could cause a kingdom's demise. Kingdoms and empires both revered and feared the woman. Lord Alba Grey, we've collected 1,000 strands of the jealous witch's mana. How should we proceed to lift your curse? Shifeng asked the frozen hero. Simple. You just need to release the mana you've collected around me. Alba Grey telepathically communicated with a thread of excitement. However, while I am removing the seal, the jealous witch's frost elf will sense this. I must ask you to stop her until I am free. Just as Shifeng was about to ask for more information, the snow around them stirred. It then gathered into the form of a woman. The woman was nearly 2 meters tall and looked mostly human, but unlike humans, her body was made entirely of snow. Divine runes etched themselves in her frozen form, giving her a sacred aura. One couldn't help the urge to submit to her will as they stood in her presence. As if the ambient mana had discovered its master, it gathered around the woman. A higher magic elf? Everyone gasped when they saw the snow woman's statistics. Ice elf, Ulinium, high magic elf, mythic, level 110 HP 3, 500, 000/3, 500, 000 magic elves had considerably high life ratings in God's domain, much higher than elemental creatures. Many of the spells humans wielded in this day and age had originated from magic elves. Mana favored these beings even more than ordinary elves because they possessed bodies made of mana itself. Meanwhile, high magic elves stood above magic elves in God's domain's hierarchy, akin to kings among magic elves. Their life ratings could even rival that of dragons. Do you really think you can escape my master's curse? Ulinium mocked as she gave Alba Grey a disdainful look. She then swept her glance over Shifeng and his companions, saying, Adventurers, it'd be best if you do not poke your noses into matters that do not concern you. Leave now, and I will spare you. Stay and help Alba Grey, and I'll ensure you remain here, alongside the rest of these foolish knights. As Ulinium spoke, the team felt an overwhelming sense of dread. They struggled to move as if the air around them froze them in place. Even breathing became a laborious task. Is she really a mythic monster? Kola muttered, shocked as he stared at Ulinium. With just a few words, High Magic Elf had immobilized Tier 3 players. She was nothing like the mythic monsters they had faced before. Guild leader, she is far too dangerous for us. If we try to fight her, only the personal guards will last more than 10 seconds. Yen Tianxing expended an immense amount of energy to whisper to Shifeng. I doubt we'll even last 5 seconds against her, Shifeng said, smiling bitterly at Ulinium. He had never expected this inferior legendary quest to be so vicious. Collecting 1,000 mana strands within 10 days in the Demonwolf mountain range had already been a nigh impossible task, but the challenge before them was simply a joke. They might have had a chance if the system had pitted them against an ordinary magic elf, but trying to fight a high magic elf was on par with challenging a bona fide dragon. Although they had raided a Tier 4 ice dragon, Heathwaite had been severely injured before they had arrived. Its combat power had been nowhere near its peak. Furthermore, Shifeng had been able to suppress it with his heavenly dragon's breath, which was the only reason they had had a slim chance of defeating it. Ulinium, on the other hand, was a completely different story. Not only was Ulinium's combat power at its peak, but as a high magic elf, she had hundreds of spells under her command. She could wipe a 100-man Tier 3 team off the face of God's domain in a matter of seconds. If players tried to fight her without specific tools to counter her attacks, their only hope of survival was to flee as far and fast as possible. Unfortunately, summoning a Tier 4 Great Demon with the Bible of Darkness was impossible as well. Ulinium had high enough intellect that she'd target Shifeng immediately, and the great demon wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Adventurers, give me 90 seconds. If you can hold out for that long, I can free myself from this curse. Alba Gray suddenly shouted. Alba Gray's words left everyone speechless. They could barely move within Yulunium's domain. They'd be lucky to stall her for 10 seconds, not to mention 90. Yulunium was no normal mythic monster. She was a creature that was more skilled with her spells than Tier 4 great wizards, and she loved large-scale combat. She could annihilate them all with one AoE spell, leaving no opportunities to challenge her. 90 seconds? After some pondering, Shifeng turned to Kola and asked, Kola, can you hold her for 10 seconds? If I activate my Berserk and life-saving skills, it should be doable, Kola said after considering his prowess. He currently wore the Frostwolf set, and with his fragmented legendary shield, he was more than capable of tanking a level 100+ mythic monster. Yulunium's life rating rivaled that of dragons, but he shouldn't have any issues tanking her for 10 seconds if he activated his Berserk and life-saving skills. Do you have a plan, guild leader? Yen Tianxing asked. They could simply surrender, but they'd have to bear the brunt of the quest's penalty. I do, but I'm not sure if it will succeed, Shifeng replied. Unfortunately, we have no other options. Kola, get ready. If Alba Gray had asked them to stall Yulunium for several minutes, Shifeng would have had no choice but to surrender, but he had a chance if he only had to hold her off for 90 seconds. Shifeng then retrieved the Bible of Darkness and summoned a great demon. Seeing this confused his companions. They knew that Yulunium was intelligent enough to ignore the great demon and attack its summoner. How could a great demon possibly slow the high magic elf down? Although they weren't sure what Shifeng intended, they followed his instructions and split up, putting as much distance between them and Shifeng as possible. Meanwhile, Kola activated his Berserk skill and waited for Shifeng's signal. Go! Shifeng yelled once everyone was in position. He immediately released the mana they had collected around Alba Gray as Kola dashed toward the enraged ice elf, activating Justice Roar to attract her attention. Foolish humans! You will die here with the rest of these fools! Yulunium bellowed. Watching Kola, she lightly waved hand. Ice lances over a dozen meters long, coalesced in the air and flew toward the MT. Without chanting an incantation or drawing any runes, Yulunium had cast the Tier 4 Ice-type spell, Frost Tooth. As the ice lances flew toward him, Kola relied on his combat standards and reaction speed to dodge, but he failed to evade one of the lances. He was forced to block the attack with his shield. Boom! The ice lance exploded against his shield, and the impact forced Kola to sink into the snowy ground. The attack had dealt over -300,000 damage, taking more than 10% of Kola's total HP. How powerful is she? Everyone's eyes nearly fell from their sockets. Kola had activated his Berserk skill and life-saving skills, so he should have substantial damage reduction, yet he had still lost over 10% of his HP from one of Yulunium's attacks. Had he tried to charge at the Ice Elf without these skills active, she would have one-shot him. Seeing that the first attack had failed to end her target, Yulunium raised her hand again and began to chant an incantation. Responding to her command, a powerful blizzard swept toward Kola, streams of wind striking like pythons and threatening to tear Kola apart. As these wind serpents attacked, Kola was forced to halt his advance and defend himself with his shield. His HP rapidly plummeted. At this rate, he didn't have enough HP to last 5 seconds, much less 10. Fortunately, every healer on the team focused on recovering Kola's HP, keeping him alive, albeit barely. As the seconds passed, Kola's HP climbed and fell like a roller coaster as he danced on the fringes of death. The team's healers couldn't mitigate Yulunium's damage fully, and each round of healing seemed less effective as Kola steadily lost HP. I can't hold on for much longer, guild leader. Kola knew he had bit off more than he could chew as he glanced at his HP bar. As Kola finished his last word, another blizzard assaulted him from behind. Unfortunately, the wind pythons attacking from the front had him preoccupied, and he could only watch as more approached from behind. It's over. Sensing the incoming attack, Kola knew his time was up. However, a figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was none other than Shifeng. 10 seconds have passed. Leave the rest to me. Shifeng shouted over the roaring wind as he charged at the incoming wind python behind Kola. Guild leader? The team was confused as they watched Shifeng try to meet the incoming blizzard in battle. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Kola was a guardian knight, yet the blizzard's pythons had devoured a significant portion of his HP. As a swordsman, Shifeng would only dig his own grave by trying to block the python's attack. Disintegration power, activate. Just as the blizzard was about to reach him, Shifeng activated the disintegration armor's strongest skill, disintegration power. The intensity of Shifeng's aura immediately skyrocketed, and gray smoke drifted from his body, shattering space around him. As the blizzard's python reached him, Shifeng swung Killing Ray to counter its attack. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.